Hi, everybody. How's it going? I am Dr. Angie Rasmussen, and welcome to this episode of Taking Shots Special Edition, where we are going to be going at the turbo cancer subcommittee hearing that is going to be happening today at the Senate Homeland Security and Government Accountability Committee. So this subcommittee, to give you a little bit of background, is the Permanent Investigation Subcommittee. So this is whatever the people on the HSGAC want to investigate or think needs investigating. In this case, it is Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin who thinks that we need to investigate the link between vaccines, specifically COVID mRNA vaccines, and so-called turbo cancer. I'm sure they're going to have some stuff about myocarditis and clots and like what have you. It's going to be the usual anti-vax quack fest. So decided that I should probably show up. Hopefully Jessica Malati Rivera is going to be able to show up as well. She's currently driving. So not very conducive to watching a Senate subcommittee hearing and doing it play by play, but we'll see how it goes. Right now, the website from the subcommittee doesn't actually seem to be streaming the video. So I will just keep chatting. Sorry, can't talk today. I will just keep chatting about some of the pertinent issues. So they've really nailed an all-star lineup of anti-vaxxers. And I can just tell you about who some of these folks are really quickly. First up, we have Dr. Angus I can't ever pronounce his last name. Dalgleish, I think, is how you pronounce it. Whatever, it's a British last name, and I just don't speak English very well. Anyways, this guy is a retired oncologist or professor of oncology from the University of London. He is also a big time lab leaker. So he thinks that the COVID pandemic started from a lab leak. I'm not sure actually if he's come around to the point where he thinks that it was a lab leak that resulted from vaccine/bioweapon research, because some people think it's one or the other or both. He might be one of those guys. But in any case, he thinks that it was a lab leak that Tony Fauci paid for essentially through NIAID subawards issued to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is not how the pandemic started. And my colleagues and I have actually shown that this is not how the pandemic started. So he's totally full of shit. Let's see here. It is now 2:30. I'm trying to see if the stream is working yet, and it doesn't appear to be. So let's move on to star witness number 2, Wafiq El-Diri. Now he's going to be covering the part of this that has to do with attacks on scientific publications and research, because he published a turbo cancer paper in the journal that he is the editor-in-chief of. And then, it got criticized on PubPeer, which is basically an online peer review, post-publication peer review site where if, people see problems in papers, they point them out. If it's something that can be corrected, it can be corrected. Journals will reach out to authors. I discovered in a very old paper of mine, actually, that there was a mistaken image duplication. It was a copy paste error. So in the process of putting a correction on that paper, just because it was so long ago, I don't have the original files anymore. It doesn't change any of the conclusions, but sometimes mistakes like that happen. And so PubPeer is a great place for that to be pointed out so that you can publish the most accurate paper possible. Now, PubPeer also points out papers that, it's more than an issue of oops, copy pasted the wrong file here. It's or misinterpreted the data, or we need to clarify this more. This is a situation where if somebody publishes a paper that has issues with data manipulation, data fabrication, really erroneous conclusions that are not supported by the data, that gets pointed out too. And as it turns out, that was pointed out in multiple ways for not just this one paper, but 93 different papers that Dr. Deary has written. And so he's very upset about this rather than, worry about why he has so many papers that are being taken apart on PubPeer. He thinks that this is an example of people censoring his incredible ideas that COVID vaccines cause turbo cancer. So, he's going to present, I'm sure, about how, that happens. I'm still unclear on the mechanism. And a lot of what they talk about doesn't really seem very consistent from one mechanism to another. So maybe there's a bunch of different kinds of turbo cancer. In any case, he's probably also going to do a lot of whining about how people have been rude to him. He's a big time tone policeman, and he's lectured me multiple times for my lack of professionalism on the hell site Twitter, because, I use the F word. Actually, I use 2 F words. I told people to fuck off. I also call them fascists when they are, in fact, supporting fascism, like he's doing. Anyways, on to the next person. It seems that the stream still has not yet started. So Sabine Hazan, she is an entrepreneur who runs a wellness microbiome grifting company. And she's, she's one of these people who thinks that you need a fecal transplant for everything. And the secret to curing every disease in the world is just balancing your microbiome or whatever, taking some probiotics, except you have to do the special ones that she recommends and you have to follow her protocol. And she's also pretty anti-vax because vaccines apparently disrupt your microbiome. That's not really what vaccines do. Everything also disrupts your microbiome, and the microbiome field, which I am not in, I should add, but the microbiome field, as it applies to virology, which I do know a little bit about, is one of those fields that's very confusing because microbiomes, or the bacteria that normally live in our guts, are very different from one person to another. And they're not all bacteria either. There's fungal organisms, there are single-celled organisms that make up the microbiome, and there are viruses that infect all of those things too, as well as the human virome, which are the viruses that normally inhabit us. There are viruses that are not harmful that do persistently infect people, and we actually don't know that much about them because they, again, are not pathogenic for the most part. There's also the viruses that are pathogenic that we get infected with, things like HIV that actually become part of our genomes, or things like herpes viruses, which enter a latent state as an episome, which means a piece of DNA that's outside the nucleus that just kind of sits there, but it persists and it can reactivate, which is why you get shingles, for example, years after you had chickenpox. People who have cold sores, people who have genital herpes, like they can reactivate. Now we're learning a lot about how Epstein-Barr virus, which is also a herpes virus, causes mononucleosis. But now it's been associated with everything from multiple sclerosis to long COVID, to, a lot of different autoimmune conditions or autonomic nervous disorders, things like that, really complex syndromes that happen down the road following a viral infection. So there's a lot of these persistent viruses that make up our microbiome too. The point of all of this is that the microbiome is incredibly complex, and taking some wellness grifters vitamin regimen and eating like their special diet and participating in all of their protocols that cost a fortune and usually a monthly membership fee. And also she's into ivermectin. So, that's not going to help your microbiome, and that's not going to make you any healthier. Eureka, the stream appears to be working now. I didn't trust the Department of Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs to actually stream this competently. So we're going to watch PBS's stream of it. And I'm just going to put this up here for now. Sorry, guys. Bear with me. Production staff of 1. We're going to go full screen on this bad boy and turn on the sound. Okay, still nobody's actually in this video. It's just the placeholder screen. So yay, I get to continue talking about these quacks. Okay, so after Sabine Hazan, the ivermectin-loving microbiome grifter, we have Saskia Mostert, who, from what I can tell, doesn't have a job anymore. She is an MD PhD who has published studies that people have demanded be retracted on the basis of them making really sort of unsupported claims about mortality. And that's implied that it's due to COVID vaccines. So that's the died suddenly strain of anti-vaxxers and turbo cancer promoters. That's the idea that like you get a COVID shot and then you just die, like you drop dead. And like the Died Suddenly documentary series, I believe it's now maybe a trilogy. There's a lot of Died Suddenly movies, but it's basically taking people who died from completely different, unrelated reasons and, you know, showing like scary, like latex veins and things like to demonstrate or imply that COVID vaccines cause this and they're just causing people to drop dead all over the place. That's totally also not true. Not true in any way, shape, or form. Okay.
Good afternoon. This hearing is called to order. Just brief explanation of how this hearing came about. I met Dr. Sabine Hazan in October of 2021 during really the height of COVID, and really related to all the work I was doing in terms of early treatment and then the COVID injection.
Early treatment, by the way, is code for ivermectin.
I'm not quite sure how you got on my radar screen, but we struck up a good texting relationship. And
texting with a T, not with an S.
Dr. Hazan made me aware of how her research, which was conducted with, supported by, guided by, overseen by the FDA, was being sabotaged. And with all the hearings and events I had done, I was trying to figure out some way of how can we hold a hearing on this.
Overseen by the FDA really means that she was trying to get FDA approval for her bullshit supplement regime.
End of last year, Dr. Hazan introduced me to Dr. Eldiri, who probably a poster child for being tormented by, I'll call them trolls.
I'm one of his chief tormentors.
And so,
because he's wrong and he's writing shit
that's kind of predicated on Dr. Eldiri's work that I think prompted all the attacks. That's why I'm holding this hearing. So let me get into my opening statement. I want to thank all the witnesses. I know this is a real imposition, take a lot of time and effort, and
looking forward to attacking them further.
Today's hearing is titled "Plausible Mechanisms of COVID-19 Injections Causing Cancer and Attacks on Scientific Publications and Research."
No, plausible doesn't mean proven or supported at all.
Discussing them together would help explain why such a large percentage of the public remains unaware of the serious adverse events caused by the COVID mRNA injection.
That's because they're made up.
In April, the subcommittee held a hearing and released a report exposing how top FDA officials decided to use a safety surveillance algorithm that they knew would, and in fact did, hide safety signals on extremely serious adverse events, including sudden death.
So that's totally different from the 10 non-existent people that were FDA officials who were just fired, found to prove that COVID vaccines kill children.
Since 1997, when the Clinton administration made America only the second nation on earth to allow mass media advertising on pharmaceutical products, Big Pharma has spent billions on TV ads to capture the media and, as a result, the narrative. Prior to 1997, there was serious journalism covering suspected vaccine injuries. In 1997, Mike Wallace reported on CBS's 60 Minutes about swine flu.
Well, 60 Minutes? You mean 60 Minutes just got gutted with Scott Kelly fired yesterday?
25 to 30 deaths and 400 to 500 cases of Guillain-Barré disease. They pulled it.
Oh, here we go.
25 to 30 deaths. We have over 39,000 deaths right now associated with the COVID injection.
That's not true.
Worldwide from the VAERS vaccine.
That's not true.
In 1982, WRC TV's Leah Thompson reported on the findings of their more than year-long investigation into the safety and effectiveness of the pertussis component of the DPT vaccine. In 1985, Phil Donahue discussed both the swine flu and DPT vaccines and related injuries during his hour-long show. Since 1997, there have been a few reports on hepatitis B, MMR, HPV vaccine safety, but the quote, safe and effective, unquote, mantra, combined with the narrative that adverse effects are, quote, rare and generally mild, unquote,
They are.
has overwhelmed any coverage of the harms.
Because the harms are
Legacy media is not
extremely
the only
rare.
American institution
And
that has
that's
been
why we have to
captured
track these and
and
find
controlled.
people who are at risk of those harms.
Big Pharma
because they
also
don't
hires and
take that
financially
role.
awards former federal health agency officials and spends lavishly on lobbying and political donations to lawmakers of both parties.
Not
It
lavishly enough
generously
for you,
funds
apparently,
programs of the
Ron.
COVID cartel, social media, medical associations like the American Medical Association and the American Association of Pediatricians, international health organizations, medical colleges, and medical journals. The testimony in today's hearing raises the question of whether Big Pharma might also be funding individuals who troll scientific research that runs counter to its goals and narratives. It should come as no surprise, therefore, that during the pandemic, treatment alternatives using cheap and safe generic drugs were not only suppressed, but actively sabotaged in favor of a liability-free and highly profitable experimental gene therapy, and that's what it is.
Yes, experimental
The fact that all
gene
the
therapy.
institutions that benefit from Big
It's
Pharma's
not,
largesse
but
actively
whatever.
push the experimental gene therapy is also the reason they are now working so hard to suppress the reality of COVID mRNA injection injuries.
The reality.
Testimony given in April's hearing detailed the safety studies that were not done on the COVID injections prior to their emergency use authorization
That safety
and
study.
eventual full approval. This list of omitted studies should shock everyone. Again, these were just in testimony. Drug-drug interactions, cardiovascular toxicity, central nervous system toxicity, other organ toxicity, blood toxicity, genotoxicity,
Everything
carcinogenic
toxicity.
Those studies weren't conducted. I'm not sure they've been conducted even today because it's approved. Now we just don't want to know.
That's not
Although legacy
remotely
media,
how
federal
the
health
FDA
officials, and
works.
medical establishment
That's
continue to
absolutely
ignore
not
and
true.
hide the lies told and the harms done by governments in response to the coronavirus.
You know, lies told by
Often the
government
media has
officials
been
like
spreading
you,
the truth
Johnson.
to a growing percentage of the global public. As a result, trust in these institutions is eroding. The only way to rebuild that lost trust is for the truth to be acknowledged in a process of public reckoning.
Correct. That
The
truth
hearings
is
I've
that
been
you're lying,
holding are
Ron
intended to
Johnson.
contribute
You're lying about all of this
to
shit.
that reckoning. Today we'll hear from highly credentialed and experienced doctors and medical researchers who will discuss the plausible mechanisms of COVID mRNA injection harms. They will also describe the attacks they are experiencing on their research and reputations because they have the courage to expose the truth.
Boo-hoo, I was
I
meaning
want
to
to
work.
sincerely thank the witnesses for their courage and the time and effort they put in their testimony and advocacy. Let me just add on this note. In a couple of my public hearings, I conclude with the statement that I am truly amazed at the knowledge that mankind has accumulated over the millennia. I mean, it is amazing what we know and how rapidly we're gaining that knowledge. But in spite of that, I would argue that what we don't know vastly, and I mean vastly, exceeds what we do.
No shit.
And so in any kind of discussion like this, in any kind of scientific research,
Acknowledge the uncertainty.
I think people involved need to approach
Here we go.
these problems with that level of modesty and that kind of humility. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ranking Member
Modesty and humility. Well, I've got none of that. Let's hear it,
Thank you,
Dick.
Chairman Johnson. I'd like to begin my remarks by reminding everybody watching today that the National Cancer Institute has concluded, quote, there is no evidence that COVID-19 vaccines cause cancer, lead to recurrence, or lead to disease progression.
Correct. See how
That is
easy
the
that was,
National
Ron?
Cancer Institute. Quote, there is no evidence that COVID-19 vaccines cause cancer, lead to recurrence, or lead to disease progression.
That's it. Cut the
End quote.
NCI budget.
I could conclude there. But I think that this hearing really merits a fuller explanation of what is at stake here. Because we need more research into finding cancer cures and more research into preventing cancer in the first place.
Couldn't agree more, Senator Blumenthal.
Cancer causes fear for everyone, and almost everyone, I venture to say, in fact, everyone has been touched by cancer in some way. And so that fear is pervasive. We can't allow that fear to cause unfounded attacks on the COVID vaccines or any other vaccine. These vaccines have saved millions of lives, and we should all be rooting for similar feats of science to help people who are stricken with cancer or help to prevent it. Cancer data is very closely tracked in the United States, and the idea that a rollout of COVID-19 vaccines has precipitated a surge in cancer is simply not supported. Nor do the vaccines make cancer grow faster, according to the American Cancer Society. Most cancer doctors recommended vaccination against COVID-19 for the cancer patients they are treating. Unfortunately, messages about the safety and effectiveness of vaccination are increasingly deluged by myths and misinformation. Immunization rates are declining across the country. Diseases like measles are surging. And tragically also, vaccines have been proven to prevent certain types of cancer. Those vaccines are facing groundless attacks from top public health officials, maybe not surprisingly, because HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy initially declined to surrender his financial stake in litigation against the maker of HPV vaccines, and then only under pressure from Congress turned his interests over to his son.
Who's also a
There's
vaccine
ample
injury attorney.
evidence, in fact, that HPV vaccines help prevent cervical cancer, a disease that is projected to kill 4,200 Americans this year. And I'm grateful that we have Tamika Felder, a cervical cancer survivor, here with us today. I really thank her for being here. You're doing us a great service. It's stories like yours, Ms. Felder, that remind us of the human impact of science's great successes.
Yeah, I want to note
And I'm
that
also
not every
grateful to have
witness here
Dr.
is a
Julie
total
Graylow,
quack.
the Chief Medical Officer of the American Society of Clinical Oncology, who's here to remind us about the absence of credible scientific evidence
The Democrats brought
linking
actual scientists
COVID-19
and cancer
vaccines to
patients.
cancer and
speak
the
for
safety of these
themselves.
vaccines for people undergoing cancer treatment.
The
Very
Republicans brought a
important.
bunch of
Thank
quacks
you,
to lie to
Dr.
you.
Graylow. As just one example of the overwhelming evidence of the safety of these vaccines, I would like to submit for the record a study from the Journal of the American Medical Association involving nearly 30 million people and finding that 4 years after vaccination, people who received an mRNA COVID-19 vaccine were less likely to die from cancer than those who were not vaccinated. I ask that it be entered the record if there's no objection, Mr. Chairman.
No objection. I wonder if that's as good as the Commonwealth Fund study you entered in the previous hearing, but no objection.
Thank you. It's unfortunate that we need Dr. Graylow to appear before a hearing like this one when
Indeed.
there are much more pressing threats to cancer patients and cancer research coming from Trump administration policy. And that's the big issue here. And the reason that I am expanding on what I said earlier, because the administration has put up needless roadblocks that have slowed the flow of grants to cancer researchers. Halts to funding imposed early last year caused the American Association of Cancer Institutes to warn that the Trump administration policies were, quote, slowing progress against cancer.
And killing
And the
people.
Trump administration's obvious animus toward mRNA technology that was used for COVID-19 vaccines threatens some of the most promising research for targeted cancer treatments. The studies canceled, the patients excluded from trials, the treatments abandoned. Decisions made today about cancer research will impact us and our children for decades to come. Just days ago, scientists announced amazing results from the study of a new drug for prostate cancer, one of the hardest cancers to treat. These results were possible in part because of work done many years ago at the National Cancer Institute. One scientist who helped with that research said, quote, "This kind of basic research is being greatly threatened by current government policies."
Sure is.
Basic research is essential. It's not just COVID vaccines. It's not just cancer vaccines. It's all kinds of medical treatment that you will find in hospitals today, saving lives, beginning with basic research that is being throttled by this administration.
It's being annihilated.
And so I hope we can all agree that advancing cures for cancer and stopping the forces that undermine them ought to be a top priority for all of us in Congress. It ought to be a bipartisan cause. I hope my colleagues will take up the mantle with me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Blumenthal. It is the tradition of this subcommittee to swear in witnesses, so if you all rise and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give before the subcommittee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated. Our first witness is Dr. Angus Dalglish. Dr. Dalglish is Professor Emeritus of Oncology at City St. George's University of London, where he has pioneered the immunotherapy of cancer. He is known for his work on HIV and cancer and received the Joshua Lederberg Prize in 2011 for his work developing cancer treatments. He's been the principal of the Institute of Cancer Vaccines and Immunotherapy since 2000 and a consultant in general medicine, immunology, virology, and oncology since 1986. And by the way, these are very abbreviated biographies. I mean, each one of these individuals on both sides have much larger biographies.
Yeah, you forgot to mention how he's an insane lap-leak conspiracy theorist.
Dr. Dalglish.
Thank you very much for asking me to give evidence on this. I'd just like to point out that I have done, as you say, I've been in cancer immunotherapy for over 3 decades, and I have made big advances in the treatment of cancer with immunotherapy. So this sets the scene that I became aware in early 22 of my patients who'd been stable for years, do mainly melanoma patients. They'd had several different types of immunotherapy. And in 6 weeks, I saw 6 patients relapse with melanoma. They'd been stable for 3 to 18 years. They felt well.
How often do melanoma relapses happen?
Investigated.
They happen a lot.
What was
even after years.
Common. And the thing that was common is they'd all received a booster vaccine from their general practitioners. Now, I know that these cancers are totally controlled by the T-cell response, so I immediately suspected the T-cell response was being perturbated.
Oh, here we go, toxic spike.
And initial investigations showed that this was likely to be true. However, there was then a paper published by some doctors in Madrid, which, and I quote, the paper is called "The Evidence of Exhausted Lymphocytes After the Third Anti-SARS-CoV-2 Vaccine Dosing Cancer Patients." I mean, this was absolutely staggering.
Not
COVID-2 patients that you get this T-cell suppression. Hard on the heels of this were then numerous reports that following the booster vaccine, we were getting IgG immunoglobulins switching, so you converted the immune system from being aggressive, fighting invaders, to one of tolerization. So therefore, the immune system was tolerating the cancer, and this was the reason that we were starting to see it. However, it is important at this stage to say that we were getting reports after I first reported this of other cancers. And my initial observation that this was all due to T-cell suppression started to fade into the perspective that other actors were at work with the vaccine, as it were. Colorectal cancer was being reported by my patients, by my fellow surgeons, as reporting, as presenting late, stage 4, not stage 1 or 2, and early in patients in their 20s and 30s and 40s in a way that we have not seen before. And then in my own practice, as I was looking for patients who had other cancers, I noticed that they too had booster vaccines, and I list them in my report. They go from everything from the common cancers, from breast, prostate, etc., and all the way through to some really unexpected ones, including glioma, and more recently, hematological malignancies. Now, looking at the literature as to why this could be, and I'm involved in 2 big publications. One's been accepted prior to changes, and this shows that there are remarkable at least a dozen mechanisms where messenger RNA can insert into the DNA and activate oncogenes, and more importantly, and especially the long term, they can suppress the suppressor networks.
That's not.
Which means if a cancer is starting to evolve, it would normally be maintained, controlled.
COVID vaccines do not integrate into the DNA in any way. They do not activate oncogenes. He is just full of shit.
Who are starting to see that it's not only my patients now, it's people I know really well who are going down with cancer, and they're going down more aggressively, and the treatment is not working nearly as well. And I'm used to people saying, oh, there's no evidence that the cancer's increasing and that there's anything to do with the vaccine. But I can assure you from the patients that I have seen that many have seen a dozen doctors before. Not one of them has ever asked the vaccine history. So of course they see no evidence. And my full detailed research into the messenger RNA vaccines, and I was on the scientific board of a company claimed to be the messenger RNA vaccine company for 5 years and left 8 years ago. So I know a lot more than the average clinician. And myself and others feel that there is no way you can control this technology, and its use for future vaccines should be banned, and the COVID ones stopped now.
What do you mean there's no way you can control this technology? You can literally make the mRNA, and it literally does not stick around.
Dr. Itty is a practicing physician scientist, American Cancer Society professor, founding director of the Cancer Center at Brown University, and chair of the Worldwide Innovative Network Consortium in Precision Oncology.
Thirstiest whiner on Twitter.
Gene he named WAF1, and a first of its kind drug approved by FDA
WAF1,
last year for the treatment of an aggressive brain cancer. Dr. Itty.
Alas, I never found anything called antivirus.
Thank you,
but
Senator Johnson and Senator Blumenthal and distinguished committee members for the opportunity. Thank you, Senator Johnson, Senator Blumenthal, and distinguished committee members for the opportunity to speak at this important hearing. I am a physician scientist and cancer researcher with more than 30 years of experience studying how our body normally fights cancer through a major tumor suppressor called P53, and finding new ways of treating it. I've also advocated on Capitol Hill since 2005 for support of research funding, which is really vital. My work has focused on how cancers develop when these normal tumor suppressor mechanisms fail, including discoveries involving how tumor suppressors work, and this has become foundational in cancer biology and oncology research. I've also studied how viruses and other biological processes can disrupt our defenses against cancer. So when the COVID pandemic began, I wanted to help by applying our expertise in cancer biology, immunology, and approved treatments to better understand and treat COVID. It's been long understood that certain viruses contribute to cancer development by disrupting tumor suppressor pathways, including P53, one of the body's most
I guess
important
what all
cancer
viruses do that, because you know what they
Early in
also
the
do? They fuck up the
pandemic,
cell cycle.
I became concerned
That's
that
what
the
tumor
COVID virus
suppressors
might
are. Their
similarly
cell cycle
interfere
control
with these defense mechanisms,
molecules.
making this an important
Viruses
area for scientific
hijack the cell, which
investigation.
most people
Early in the
know
pandemic, I
occurs,
also expressed
and in
uncertainty
the
on
process
social
of doing
media
this,
about the natural origin of the COVID virus. And this is when I first started to experience repercussions of speaking out against the mainstream narrative. What I
uncertainty
didn't
about the
expect
natural origin
were
means he's a
the
lab
attacks
leaker.
on science itself. By July 2020, my laboratory published findings showing that a class of cancer drugs known as MEK inhibitors suppressed ACE2, the cell surface receptor the COVID virus uses to infect human cells. By April of 24, we reported findings suggesting that the spike protein associated with COVID infection or COVID vaccination could reduce the ability of P53 to activate genes involved in suppressing cancer.
Oh, come
Based on
on.
these findings, we emphasize that effective vaccines against viruses such as COVID should strengthen immunity against infection without interfering with the body's natural defenses against cancer.
These findings
These
are currently
concerns
getting
were raised through
destroyed
normal
on
scientific
Twitter, by the
channels,
way.
yet the response was not open scientific engagement, but escalating attacks. Instead of contributing to scientific dialogue, the findings triggered attacks on both the research and the researchers involved. Much of this occurred through an
Because you
online
are
platform known
making
as
conclusions
PubPeer,
that are not supported by your
originally
data.
created
what
about a
people
decade ago to
called
identify
criticism.
fraud and scientific misconduct. Unfortunately, the platform increasingly became weaponized against researchers whose findings
Sure.
challenged prevailing narratives.
Perhaps you're involved in
The
fraud and
platform
scientific
permits
misconduct.
anonymous accusations without meaningful accountability. There's no disclosure of conflicts of interest, no statute of limitations, or citizenship requirements. These attacks are public,
Citizenship
amplified through
requirements.
social media, and can continue indefinitely regardless of whether wrongdoing is ever established. This is precisely what happened to us. Although we corrected minor errors where appropriate and continue to do so, none altered the underlying results or conclusions of our work.
Because we made them up.
Nevertheless, our publications became subject of sustained public attacks that damage reputation and undermine scientific
If you didn't want your reputation
credibility.
damaged, you shouldn't have published bullshit.
Despite these ongoing attacks, last summer I agreed to serve on an HHS committee on immunization practices, working group on COVID immunizations, and as an expert,
cancer.
I therefore looked into everything we know about cancer and COVID infection and COVID vaccination.
You read a
And
bunch
by
of
the
tweets.
fall, found nearly 70 papers describing more than 300 reported cancer cases from 27
What journals were
countries
those papers
following
in?
one or more COVID mRNA vaccine injections.
Somehow I don't think it was Science or
The
Nature, the
reported
New England Journal of Medicine.
cancers occurred near injection sites like sarcomas or
Oh,
lymphomas, right at the injection site, within
Right
the
at
head
the
and neck
injection
region,
site.
within and elsewhere, including, as Dr. Deglish mentioned, brain tumors and other tumors. In some reported cases, spike protein was identified within tumor tissue. Our findings were published in January of this year, and shortly afterwards, I was contacted directly by former Japanese Minister Kazuhiro Haraguchi, who reported developing a diffuse large B-cell lymphoma that later metastasized to his tonsil, and biopsied, and they found spike protein. There should be no spike in tumors.
maybe he was
These
infected with SARS
observations
too.
warrant serious scientific investigation, and as such, a number of unexpected observations have been made with the COVID mRNA vaccines that suggest potentially plausible mechanisms and connections to cancer.
Potentially
The
plausible
attacks on
now.
my publications intensified and continue to the present day,
Mhm.
despite no
Your
findings of fraud,
publications are total
misconduct,
shit.
or wrongdoing after years of investigation.
Normally we
And for
investigate by taking it
vaccines
to
that
the
are
journal,
safe
but
and
you're the fucking
effective.
editor in chief,
Both
bud.
our paper and the journal itself became targets of attacks through peer and related online campaigns. I remain in effect guilty until proven innocent. Patients deserve informed consent. Scientists deserve the freedom to investigate legitimate scientific concerns. There are many open
So you're
questions,
welcome to
including
investigate
who
it.
is at
You're not
greatest
welcome to
risk
make shit
from
up
these
based on
vaccines,
no
and
evidence.
there shouldn't be fear of reputational destruction, institutional retaliation, or professional ruin.
There should be when
A
you commit
peer needs to
scientific
be held
misconduct. In
accountable
fact,
for
that's how we
making
discourage
false
people from
accusations
submitting
against
scientific
physicians and scientists
misconduct.
that destroy
There's
patients'
accountability.
and careers. Thank you.
They're held accountable for it.
Dr.
And
Ellier. Our
sometimes
next
that
witness
does
is
mean
Dr.
destroying your
Saskia
career, because that's what happens when you make up data.
Dr. Mostert studied medicine at VU Amsterdam in the Netherlands and conducted a PhD program on compliance and childhood leukemia treatment in Indonesia. She then worked as a research coordinator of global health and pediatric oncology research programs at Amsterdam University Medical Center and Princess Maxima Center. Her fields of expertise include treatment compliance, the problem of corruption in medicine and hospital detention practices.
Is she working now? Is she working?
Dear members of the American Senate, in 2024, our team published a study in BMJ Public Health examining all-cause mortality data across Western countries between 2020 and 22.
A widely
These were
criticized
government-reported
paper
mortality
that
reports
many
routinely
people
used
have
throughout
demanded
mainstream
be
public
retracted.
health. The peer review process had taken more than 9 months. Our study showed that excess mortality remained elevated across 47 Western countries, totaling more than 3 million excess deaths. Excess mortality persisted across the overwhelming majority of countries studied after the acute phase of the pandemic. We did not claim certainty regarding the causes of excess mortality. Rather, we asked attention for 3 major events that were non-existent before the pandemic: the COVID infection, the
Implied,
containment
basically, the
measures, and the
vaccines were
COVID vaccines.
responsible.
In addition, we acknowledged other overlooked factors. We urged governments and public health leaders to investigate the underlying causes and evaluate their policies. During the pandemic, extraordinary measures were justified in the name of protecting human life. Public officials and media emphasized that every COVID death mattered and every life deserved protection. I believe the discovery of more than 3 million excess deaths would prompt the same urgency in investigating their causes. Instead, what followed often resembled what I could only describe as blind fury. What could explain this massive outrage? During the pandemic, health policies were combined with psychological tactics to influence public behavior. Governments and media implemented psychological manipulation and fear propaganda.
Oh, did they?
Without our awareness or consent, that increases conformity and reduces tolerance for reason and dissenting voices, such
But
as
what about all of you
tunnel
anti-vaxxers
vision,
that
emotional
lied about
messaging,
vaccines, said that they were
polarization,
going to kill
and
people?
important, the distinction between worthy versus unworthy victims. So distinguishing between important victims who deserve extensive attention or support and other victims who can be ignored. Censorship and suppression
You mean
tactics
victims
have
of
been used
vaccine
against
injuries.
doctors and scientists,
They can be ignored
questioning the
because they're
official
made up.
COVID narrative. I will mention a few. The devaluation tactics, discrediting critics and criticism using labeling such as misinformation. Cover-up tactics.
Well, I'll
latent
actually call it
censorship,
lies
using
and
proxies,
disinformation.
fact-checkers,
So,
shadow
yep.
banning, and deplatforming. Reinterpretation tactics, favorably framing censorship
I think if you
as
lie
protection of the
to make
public or
people
follow
make
the
medical
science.
decisions that are going
Official
to kill
channel
them,
tactics,
you
which
should be
gives
deplatformed.
censorship the appearance of legitimacy of justice and hides political or economic conflicts of interest. And last but not least, the
What are your
intimidation
political or
tactics,
economic
using
conflicts of
fear,
interest,
threats,
lady?
coercion to silence
You have a
critics
job.
and others.
Who's funding you?
Encountered blind and irrational fury after our publication can thus be explained by tunnel vision disruption. Not
Blind
only
and
the worthy
irrational, huh?
victims, the COVID
That's a great
patients,
way
but
of
also the unworthy victims,
discrediting
the
your
lockdown victims,
intellectual
and the vaccine
opponents.
injured were described. Polarization in society between those who followed the official COVID narrative and those who questioned it became visible. Despite a supportive statement from Reuters, media outlets used their devaluation tactics and labeled the publication as anti-vax, conspiracy theory, and misinformation.
It is anti-vax,
One affiliated
and
hospital
it is
publicly distanced
disinformation.
itself from the
It is
study
a
and announced
propaganda
a scientific
campaign.
integrity investigation. Institutional responses are increasingly used as official channel tactics to discredit, intimidate, isolate, and silence those raising unwelcome scientific questions. I resigned. Scientific integrity investigations can be evaluated according to confidentiality, transparency, presumption of innocence, and fairness principles. To my opinion, all these principles have been trampled on. The institutional confidential report about my co-authors was leaked to a national newspaper and resulted in a hit piece. This example speaks volumes. Be clear, I
So
lost
she
my
resigned,
position after publishing
to be
official
clear,
government mortality data
after
and calling for further
an
scientific
investigation into whether
into
she and her
persistent excess
co-authors
deaths.
committed scientific
Science cannot
misconduct showed that
function
they
when
did,
legitimate questions become
but she thought
professionally
the
dangerous to
investigation
ask.
was bullshit, so
When
she did
scientists
rather
fear
than
professional
be fired
destruction,
for
the public
scientific
loses
misconduct.
access to honest scientific inquiry. The Institute concluded that scientific integrity was not violated in our study. No plagiarism, fabrication, or falsification took place. Nevertheless, the Institute persists on retraction of the paper for containing misinformation about possible causes of excess mortality. Ironically, the text on containment measures and vaccines was much shorter in the original version of the paper. The reviewers selected by the journal had asked us to either delete the text or provide more evidence. As there is evidence available, we included it. All added references concerned peer-reviewed publications from well-known institutes indexed on PubMed. My proposed
How many of them have been
post-publication
retracted?
revision that included
It
a
doesn't take
section
that
on
long to get
vaccine
indexed on
effectiveness
PubMed, by the
in
way.
reducing mortality
Will
was
do it.
ignored by the
Doesn't
journal.
require peer review.
Right from the start, it was an unequal battle. Our call for investigation of underlying causes had to be censored and erased one way or another. The tunnel vision leaves no room for unworthy victims. Yet the persistent excess mortality remains unexplained.
Victims, lady,
Our case
your
is not
paper
isolated.
is being
Books have
investigated
documented
for
the
needing
suppression of more than
retracted.
80 Dutch doctors and scientists, as well as the removal of 60 professors across Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. In recent years, the number of removals for ideological insubordination has increased significantly.
Ideological
Similar patterns emerge
insubordination in this
across
case means
institutions.
actually making
After a media scandal, the
dangerous
university
anti-vaccine
distances itself and
recommendations.
starts disciplinary proceedings. The reason given for dismissal is scientific integrity violation, whereas the real reason appears to be dissent.
No,
Recently,
actually,
we established a task force on
not
academic freedom in
dissent.
the Netherlands
it
to
is not
investigate
dissenting to
censorship,
give your
suppression,
patients
and
or to give
systematic
medical
attacks on
advice
doctors and
that will
scientists,
encourage people to
questioning
actively
aspects
harm
of the
themselves.
official COVID narrative.
That's not dissent.
Censorship
That's
undermines
hindering people.
academic freedom
It's
by
not
discouraging
censorship.
legitimate
Your
scientific
bullshit
inquiry.
paper
It
shit
narrows the
canned by
range of
peer reviewers.
perspectives
It's
permitted
not
within
censorship
public
to
debate
have your
and
shit paper
stimulates
rejected by a
self-censorship
journal.
among academics. Subsequent false scientific consensus can lead to dysfunctional policies. If we want to restore public trust, we must once again protect academic freedom and the right of scientists and doctors to question prevailing assumptions without fear of professional destruction.
Scientists have always had
It
this
is
freedom.
time to
There is a difference between scientists and doctors making recommendations that are unsupported and that are lies.
We'll start, next we'll go to Dr. Sabine Hazen.
And
Dr. Hazen
consenting
received
or
her MD in Canada and
implying
completed her
consent.
residency at the University of Miami. She was the first woman gastroenterology fellow at the University of Florida and became an expert in the microbiome. She is currently the CEO of a private gastroenterology clinic and a clinical trial drug development company, as well as Progenibiome LLC, a genetic research lab that studies the clinical implications of the microbiome. Dr.
Genetic Research Lab, huh? She's doing 16S sequencing and she's full of shit.
All right, I'm Dr. Sabine Hazen, a research gastroenterologist. For more than 3 decades, I've done hundreds of clinical trials for leading pharmaceutical companies. My work has contributed to bringing biologics, antibiotics, and vaccines to market. While these advances have helped patients, they have also revealed critical gaps in our understanding of human health, particularly the gut microbiome. The microbiome, your bacteria in your gut, is your immunity. In 2019, I founded Progenobiome, which is a research laboratory. And I say research because the microbiome research is at its infancy and it's not going to be of my lifetime. My goal was simple: to rigorously study the microbiome in real-world clinical settings. My team and I launched 61 clinical trials to actively understand the gut connection in various diseases: Alzheimer's, autism, Parkinson's, cancer. This is precision medicine, taking care to each patient's unique microbiome signature. Because yes, in the microbiome space, we're all different. And if we're all different, there is no normal in the microbiome space.
Which means,
so in
conveniently,
2020,
I can make
I
it
found
whatever the
myself
fuck
in
I
a very
want.
interesting position. I was taking care of high-profile individuals in Malibu. I had a portal with the FDA that could write protocols and submit protocols to the FDA.
Anybody can have that, by the way.
Research lab that could look at the microbiome. So this
They can take
unique
somebody's shit
position,
and like do
I felt like
a
I was the
sequence
best
on it,
person
which
to
has
be
been around, by the way,
looking
for
at the
15
microbiome
years.
and looking at COVID. While exchanging information with scientists at NIST, the National Institute of Standards, who were looking at COVID in septic tanks. And by the way, for those of you who don't know National Institute of Standards, they overlook DARPA, FDA, CDC.
They do not overlook DARPA, FDA, and the
Progenobiome
CDC. That is
became
not
the first
remotely how
lab
the government is
worldwide
structured.
to document whole genome sequencing of COVID virus in clinical patient
For the last
feces.
time, it is
Our
not
paper was
COVID virus.
published
The name
in
of the
Gut
virus is
Pathogens
SARS
in
coronavirus 2.
2021
The name of the disease
after
is
a
coronavirus
6-month
disease
peer review,
2019.
only to be retracted in
I
May
hate COVID virus so
2025
much.
without any valid scientific justification or even notifying the peer reviewers that approved the paper to begin with. I have to point out again that this was a landmark paper that showed COVID in the stools of clinical patients, not septic tanks, but clinical patients. While we were looking at stools, we discovered that hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin reduced the viral presence of COVID. In other words, COVID disappeared on these. However, those drugs also killed the microbiome. And that was the important finding during the pandemic, that everybody's different and everybody needs a different treatment. It is also important to note that during the pandemic, I treated under FDA
Tim
oversight.
Culkin
I
behind her?
actually wrote 3 protocols on hydroxychloroquine versus placebo and ivermectin doxycycline versus placebo. And during my whole time that the FDA was watching, we lost no one. No one died on my shift. And by the way, I've treated thousands of patients. Doesn't the public want to know, how did I treat? What criteria did I use to divide the treatment in
No,
patients?
because you actually
We
didn't do
conducted a
anything.
review of these patients treated and noticed actually that ivermectin-based multi-drug therapy helped severely hypoxic patients. This data was published in 2022 after 8 months of peer review scrutiny, and then retracted in March 2025. We also published cardiac safety data from our phase 2 trial using hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. You will remember during the pandemic that there was a concern about cardiac problem from hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. My team risked their lives putting Holter monitors on people's hearts to monitor and capture the QT prolongation, and there were no QT prolongation. We published this data in December 2024. The paper was retracted in 2025, February. These
How is it
retractions
risking somebody's life to put a
challenge the
Holter monitor
feasibility
on
of
someone?
early treatment. Remember, if there was a treatment, vaccines would not have passed. Our most significant
That's not
discovery,
true.
however,
There
was
is a
on
treatment for
bifidobacteria.
COVID. It's called
What is
Paxlovid.
bifidobacteria? You
Also,
ask
technically, I guess
a bacteria
molnupiravir
that's
is
in your probiotics.
for
When
it
you
as
turn your
well.
bottle of probiotics, that's the bacteria.
There's multiple
it's
treatments
bifidobacteria.
for COVID.
Bifidobacteria
The
is an
vaccines are
important
still
microbe
approved.
that helps you break down your food so that the sugar comes out and goes into the cell, into your mitochondria.
Oh
Without
boy, she's
bifidobacteria,
also
the
a
sugar's not
metabolic
going into your
grifter.
cell.
That's right. Of
Ask
course.
yourself,
How could she not be?
how are you going to metabolize? How are you going to have immunity if you don't have your cells working? So bifidobacteria was an extremely important finding because we discovered that severe COVID patients lacked bifidobacteria, while patients that were high risk, exposed, had a lot of bifidobacteria.
How many of those patients were taking
We also
antibiotics?
discovered that people with autism, Alzheimer's, Crohn's disease, Lyme disease, irritable bowel syndrome, mental health, invasive cancer, lacked bifidobacteria. Bifidobacteria appears in the young at a high level and disappears as we get older. We found that vitamin C, bovine immunoglobulin, and ivermectin, a fermented product of a bacteria called Streptomyces, could help increase bifidobacteria and restore. Is that why we were seeing possibly hypoxic patients improving? I wrote a hypothesis. Perhaps ivermectin was improving the bifidobacteria. That hypothesis was published and retracted in 2023. When a hypothesis is retracted, we've lost science and medicine.
It's not a
We then
hypothesis
presented
being
data
retracted, it's your
on the
paper. A
vaccines, and we
hypothesis is what
discovered that the
failed
vaccines
testing,
killed
and
the
you published
microbiome,
it anyways as if it
specifically
were
the
true,
bifidobacteria.
and that's why your
That
paper was
abstract
retracted.
won the best
Let's get it
research
straight
award
how
of
the
the American
scientific method
College of
works.
Gastro and reached 18,000 GI doctors, yet was never published. If you follow the disappearance of bifidobacteria in the gut, you start to understand disease. You start to see why the newborns, 1 in 12 kids in California, 12
I
boys
better
in
start studying
California has
bifidobacteria
autism.
then.
If
I
you
do
look at
study
the data
pathogenesis,
that
which
just
is
came out that
disease.
showed newborns, to only 25% of newborns are born with adequate levels of bifidobacteria. So if you restore the bifidobacteria like we did in our lab in kids with autism, you will actually resume speech, which is what we showed in 2 twins where we restored the bifidobacteria. That abstract won a research award at the American College of Gastro. In fact, Progenibiome has earned 4 consecutive awards at the American College of Gastro, affirming peer recognition of our work. Yet promising observations face problems and persistent barriers when attempting to publish in papers. Pass rigorous review are retracted over minor, easily correctable issue. The main
Minor,
non-medical
easily
scientist that
correctable, like
criticized
you
my
saying that
papers
ivermectin
has
works and
patent
it's
on
all
the microbiome. Can you
bifidobacteria
say
shit.
conflict of interest? So I asked Congress
A
today,
conflict of interest,
should
like your business selling
non-physicians
ivermectin and
without
microbiome
relevant
bullshit?
clinical expertise review and override medical data from practicing physicians? True expertise must be challenged by qualified peers, not outsiders.
This is what
Members
Douglas
of
was talking
Congress,
about. This is what
imagine the
Elziri was
possibilities if
talking about.
scientists
This is
could
what
publish without
Saskia
fear of
Postert was
politically
talking about.
motivated retraction.
And this is what
If
she's
we could
talking about now.
focus
They're all
on
complaining
advancing
that their
knowledge
papers are
instead
getting
of
retracted
defending it.
or
The
not
American
passing
people
peer
deserve
review. And they're not
transparent,
saying that
rigorous science.
maybe it's because they
Protecting
published
scientific
something that wasn't
integrity is
true.
not just
They
about my
committed
work,
scientific
but it is
misconduct.
about
They
securing
didn't
the future of medicine
declare
for
their own
all.
conflicts of
Because
interest,
ultimately,
or they
we're
just
all
didn't
going to be
publish
patients.
work that could pass
Thank
peer
you.
review.
Dr. Hazen, I was hoping we get through all the opening statements.
I
before we
know.
had to go.
Just an attack.
We got a quick vote, so we'll put the hearing into recess, and as soon as we get back, we'll.
Okay, we're taking a quick little break here to go let the senators vote on something. So let's just go over very quickly, and then I'm going to take a break too. What was just discussed by these guys. So far, we've gotten an update from 4 extremely butthurt grifters who have been busy publishing or trying to publish their stuff about ivermectin and turbo cancer and clot shots and myocarditis and all this other stuff that's basically not true and not supported by evidence. And now we've just heard all of them complain that, oh, well, nobody's listening to me because, oh, the data doesn't support it, but I'm a big, important doctor. And all of my patients are telling me that they're getting turbo cancer. So it must be true. And it's actually being covered up now by the status quo. And, you know, you hear this from all of them. El Deary's talking about how people are so mean to him on PubPeer and they're tearing all his papers apart just because he has the, you know, audacity to investigate a scientific question that nobody wants to investigate. Saskia Mostert had to resign her job because she was just so incensed that they would even have an investigation into her and her co-authors' scientific integrity. See, for her, having an investigation into possible scientific misconduct, knowingly publishing something that wasn't true, which is really a career-ending thing, as it should be, because, you know, Ron Johnson talked at the beginning about how we don't trust scientists anymore. Maybe it's because all of these people who are actually being investigated for scientific misconduct and for lying to people and publishing things that aren't true, that benefit them through conflicts of interest that they are not disclosing. Maybe it's because they're lying to us all the time. That could be part of the reason that, you know, there's this crisis of trust. I am just blown away, although this is exactly what I expected. This is what's called gaslighting and DARVO, in which these people who have been lying to people, who have made medical recommendations that they profit from, that they have advantages from, either professionally. In El Deary's case, it was rumored that he was being considered for director of the National Cancer Institute, and all of a sudden, he's the reigning turbo cancer expert all over Twitter trying to get attention about how severely wronged he has been. Because when he got that attention, people actually started looking at his papers, and, you know, competent scientists found that 93 of them had significant errors enough to discuss them at length on PubPeer. I mean, these guys are all such a bunch of whiners. I'm going to go, you know, refresh my drink. It's water. It's only 1:30 in the afternoon here in Saskatoon. I'm just going to go take a bio break, and I'll be right back. And, you know, I'll chit chat some more until the senators come back and finish this committee or subcommittee hearing. Seems like we might have a while to go. Sorry about that. Seems like we might have a while to go, considering they haven't even gotten through the opening statements yet. We just have to hear this airing of grievances from all of these ivermectin grifters. So I gotta go. Maybe I'll get a cup of coffee while I'm at it. Talk to you soon. Don't go away, though. Just stick me on mute.
So no further disruptions. Our next witness is Dr. Asim Malhotra.
Okay, we're back.
Malhotra is a multi-award-winning, internationally renowned British cardiologist. He served in an advisory role for health policy across governments, including as an ambassador to the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges and trustee of the King's Fund, a health policy think tank. He was ranked the #1 doctor in the world influencing obesity thinking, was named one of the UK's most influential scientists. Dr. Malhotra.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. In January 2021, indoctrinated with the unlikelihood of any major harm, I took 2 doses of Pfizer's mRNA vaccine.
Indoctrinated, huh?
Unaware at the time.
That's an interesting way of putting
in
it
fact, a
when you're talking about
prophylactic gene
informed
therapy
consent.
product, and unlike any traditional vaccine. Although I was at very low risk of serious illness from COVID-19 due to my age and perfect metabolic health,
Perfect
I was
metabolic
motivated to
health.
protect my patients.
I want to get a look at those mitochondrial numbers. Asim.
Doctors, I was requested to appear on Good Morning Britain to help tackle vaccine hesitancy amongst high-risk ethnic minority groups. 5 months later, a personal tragedy triggered a complete U-turn in my perception of the vaccine. We were dealing with a medical product that was actually unsafe and defective. My fit and healthy 73-year-old father, honorary vice president of the British Medical Association, who also happened to be my best friend and last surviving member of my immediate family, died after suffering an unexpected cardiac arrest. Post-mortem findings revealed severe coronary artery disease, and subsequent published mechanistic evidence suggested that 2 doses of the mRNA COVID vaccine likely caused a massive acceleration in atherosclerosis, leading to his sudden death.
I think we're going to need a second opinion on
I
that.
published a 2-part peer-reviewed paper in the Journal of Insulin Resistance, calling for a moratorium on these unsafe and defective products.
The Journal of Insulin
The most
Resistance.
damning evidence was a reanalysis of Pfizer and Moderna's original trials. It determined a frequency of serious harm from the product that was 2 to 4 times more likely than being hospitalized with severe COVID.
Reanalyze vaccine trial analysis in the Journal of
If the system had been
Insulin
more
Resistance.
transparent, this prophylactic gene therapy would likely not have been injected into a single human being in the first place.
Oh, bullshit.
Although there is now a
Gene
multitude
therapy.
of high-quality research supporting those analyses, there's been predictable little to any mainstream media coverage, a symptom of the downstream effects of how big corporations exert their power by controlling the dominant narrative. I have personal experience with these downstream effects. Towards the end of
I
last
bet
year,
you have
at the
personal
Reform
experience
Party
because
political
controlling the
conference,
narrative
I
is
quoted
exactly
Britain's
what
most
you
eminent
guys are doing
oncologist,
in
Professor
this
Angus
whole
Dalgleish.
hearing.
He believes that the COVID mRNA vaccine likely played a significant role in cancers of members of the royal family. Predictably, I was smeared and misrepresented in the media. Even the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, misled Parliament, suggesting that I'd claimed that all vaccines cause cancer. In quotes, "These dangerous conspiracies cost lives," he said. I also experienced public smears and attacks from influential sections of the medical profession.
Right, because you're
I'm a
saying
grieving
shit that's
vaccine
not true.
doctor. I've been diagnosed with a persistent autoimmune condition related to loss of bifidobacteria in my guts, and advanced blood tests suggested I'm at slightly increased risk of cancer in the short term. Looking at the totality of up-to-date evidence and what you've heard from eminent witnesses today, in my view, millions of Americans and millions more across the world may be in clear and present danger of suffering premature cardiovascular disease and cancer.
Oh, bullshit.
Without allowing all scientists to debate this openly, without fear of censure, we will not be able to identify who is most at risk and how these risks can be mitigated. When it comes to making money, multinational corporations have been diagnosed by preeminent forensic psychologist Dr. Robert Hare and law professor Joel Bacan as legal entities that fulfill the criteria for psychopathy.
What?
Characteristics include callous unconcern for the safety of others,
So a law
incapacity
professor
to
and a
experience
psychologist diagnosed an
repeated lying,
institution
and
as
conning
being a
others for
psychopath?
The evidence presented here today exposes the corporate tyranny underlying public health practice. This profitability over people rooted in the neoliberal economic model has led to trust being an all-time low in the medical
Neoliberal
profession.
economic model. I wonder
A
if
full
he got
public
that from
apology
his
from
buddy,
government
Nigel
bodies and medical
Farage, from
leadership
the
to the vaccine
Reform
injured and
UK
bereaved
party that
is an
he
essential
is
first step
a spokesperson
in restoring that trust. Tyranny emerges when people are afraid to say what they think.
No, tyranny
When we have
emerges
something
when
to
people
say,
like you come out and
silence
spread
is a lie.
propaganda and lies
When
that
everyone lies all the
intends for
time,
tyranny to
the
emerge.
tyranny is complete. To save the health of the American people and to save democracy, it is our responsibility to expose, resist, and dismantle the era of corporate tyranny we currently find ourselves in. Thank
This
you.
is completely
Thank you, Dr. Walsh.
incorrect,
Next,
and this
the
motherfucker
witness is
doesn't know
Dr.
a
Dean Graylo.
goddamn thing about
Dr.
democracy,
Graylo is
considering
Executive Vice
he is
President
part
and Chief
of the
Medical
party
Officer
in
for
the
the American
UK
Society of
that is
Clinical
trying to
Oncology.
do to the
He is
UK
Professor
what
Emeritus
Trump
of
did to
Medical
America.
Oncology and Global Health at the University of Washington School of Medicine, and the co-founder of 2 nonprofits to support female cancer survivors and promote cancer advocacy and education in developing countries. Dr. Graylo.
I'm probably going to quiet
Thank you,
down
Chairman
for
Johnson,
her
Ranking
since she's
Member
actually
Blumenthal, and
competent.
members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to share my clinical perspective on this important topic. As you've heard, I'm the Chief Medical Officer and Executive Vice President for the Association for Clinical Oncology, or ASCO, a 501c6 organization established by the American Society of Clinical Oncology in 2019 that represents more than 50,000 oncology professionals who care for people living with cancer. ASCO works to ensure that all individuals with cancer have access to high-quality care, and we're committed to the principle that knowledge conquers cancer. Through research and education, ASCO works to conquer cancer and create a world where cancer is prevented or cured and every survivor is healthy. We appreciate the opportunities to discuss the critical role of mRNA technology in cancer care and the unwavering commitment to patient safety that guides its development. For nearly 3 decades prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the primary driving force behind mRNA research was cancer immunotherapy. When exploring emerging therapies like mRNA vaccines, oncology professionals rely on well-designed clinical trials to establish clinical efficacy, evaluate unintended consequences, and ensure the benefits outweigh the potential risks. Currently, there is no clinical evidence proving that mRNA COVID-19 vaccines cause cancer or accelerate cancer growth. Cancer is caused by a series of gene mutations and does not develop suddenly. Rather, tumor evolution is a multi-step process that generally takes years or even decades to manifest clinically. The appearance of late-stage aggressive tumors within weeks or months of an injection is biologically incompatible with what we've learned from decades of research on the causes of cancer. In fact, RNA breaks down quickly in the body and doesn't enter a person's DNA. In other words, mRNA vaccines do not cause gene mutations. The benefits of COVID vaccination in patients with cancer are supported by a large and growing body of evidence. mRNA COVID-19 vaccines protect patients with cancer who often have compromised immune systems, increasing their risk of negative outcomes if they contract COVID-19. Before vaccines were available, researchers at the University of Wisconsin-Madison found that COVID-19 patients with the current cancer diagnosis were 24% more likely to require intensive care and 58% more likely to die in the hospital compared to after the vaccines became available. In contrast, a 2025 study led by investigators at Vanderbilt University found that cancer patients who received COVID-19 vaccinations had a 50% reduction in their risk of hospitalization. These data are reinforced by an ASCO study demonstrating a clinically significant relationship between vaccination and survival in cancer patients diagnosed with COVID-19. mRNA technology also represents a really exciting and significant clinical advancement for therapeutic cancer vaccines aimed at treating existing tumors. Unlike traditional treatments such as chemotherapy, which broadly destroys both cancerous and healthy dividing cells, mRNA technology is designed to teach an individual's body to recognize tumor markers that are unique to that patient's cancer, encouraging the patient's immune system to destroy just cancer cells, not healthy ones. While the FDA has not yet granted approval for mRNA cancer vaccine therapies, clinical trials are actively testing mRNA cancer vaccines and have reported good tolerability and promising clinical activity. For example, just this past week, At our annual meeting, researchers shared the results of a trial that shows melanoma patients who receive a cancer-fighting mRNA vaccine, in addition to immunotherapy, had better cancer outcomes than patients who received the immunotherapy alone. Additional research led by investigators at MD Anderson found that patients who received the COVID vaccine along with immunotherapy to treat non-small cell lung cancer had better cancer outcomes than those who were not vaccinated. Existing research provides strong indications that mRNA vaccines will likely join approved immunotherapies as new options for patients with cancer facing difficult diagnoses. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on these important issues. ASCO remains deeply committed to advancing safe, evidence-based care for all patients, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Graylow. Our last witness is Ms. Tamika Felder. Ms. Felder is a cancer survivor, award-winning women's health advocate, author, filmmaker, and the founder of Chief Visionary Officer at Survivor. Just Survivor. You spell it different. I get it, though. Survivor, Inc., a nonprofit that specializes in cervical cancer and advocacy and support. She currently serves as a co-chair on the National HPV Vaccination Roundtable and was appointed by President Biden to be a member of the National Cancer Advisory Board. Ms. Felder.
Thank you so much to you, the chair, the ranking member, and to all of you here for having me, and especially for including the patient voice. My name is Tamika Felder, a 25-year cervical cancer survivor. Today, I speak to the safety and importance of vaccines for all people and to advocate for the open and accurate sharing of scientific information so that families and communities can protect themselves and future generations. I was diagnosed in 2001 at the age of 25 while working here in Washington, D.C. as a broadcast journalist. The disease forced me to confront the fragility of health, and I endured a hysterectomy, chemotherapy, and radiation, which ultimately led to the loss of my fertility. Today, as a survivor and patient advocate, I have dedicated my work to education, empowerment, and ensuring that every person has accurate access to health, medical information, trusted health care, and life-saving prevention tools. I also firmly believe that the HPV vaccine, which would have offered protection against the HPV types most commonly associated with cervical cancer, could have changed the trajectory of my life. The human cost of cervical cancer remains a preventable disease for most people when prevention and screening are accessible and effectually utilized. Too many lives are cut short by this disease. June is National Cancer Survivorship Month, and I'm one of the 18.6 million cancer survivors in the U.S. But I also want to recognize, honor, and mourn the individuals whose lives were also lost to cervical cancer, including Teolita Rickenbacker of Georgia, Jennifer Myers of Pennsylvania, Erica Frazier Stum of Indiana, and Becky Wallace of California. These are just a few in the United States, an estimated over 600,000 people who projected to die from cancer. This translates to about 1,700 deaths per day, making cancer the second leading cause of death in this country. Each of these women were more than a diagnosis. They were mothers, sisters, friends, and contributors to their communities. Their stories remind us why prevention, vaccination where appropriate, and continued research are essential to save others from needless suffering and loss. While other countries are nearing cervical cancer elimination, the United States is still behind, despite having the tools needed for elimination. Vaccines approved for the use in the United States undergo rigorous multi-phase testing for safety and efficacy before they are licensed. The overwhelming majority of vaccines have favorable safety profiles and the benefits, reduction of infectious disease, prevention of severe illness and death, and protection of vulnerable populations greatly outweigh the risk of rare adverse events. Vaccines are not just about one disease. They are about a standard approach to preventing contagious and deadly illnesses. The safety frameworks apply to vaccines across the board, routine immunizations for children, adults, and special populations. Cancer prevention vaccines like the HPV vaccines, influenza vaccines, and vaccines for other preventable diseases. Science provides the best available evidence and the safety and effectiveness of vaccines. We rely on rigorous research, transparent reporting, and peer-reviewed findings is essential to protect public health. In an era of rapid information exchange, we must commit to sharing factual, science-based information. Misinformation and fear-mongering about vaccines undermine trust, delay or prevent vaccination, and leave people vulnerable to preventable diseases. Public health communication should be clear, compassionate, and inclusive. It should acknowledge concerns, provide transparent explanations of benefits and risks, and connect people with trusted healthcare providers who can answer questions and offer guidance. Survivors and patients must be at the center of conversations about vaccines and cancer prevention. We bring lived experiences with disease, treatment, and survivorship, perspective that matters when designing education, outreach, and clinical guidance. As a cervical cancer survivor and advocate, I see both the devastating toll of cancer and the profound promise of prevention. Vaccines, including the HPV vaccine, are powerful tools when used alongside screening and treatment. We can reduce the burden. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to testify. I am grateful for your consideration of policies that protect communities today and for generations to come. And as Lindsay Gillette Lee reminded me yesterday, she's a 3-year cervical cancer survivor from North Carolina. May our stories pave the way so others don't have the same stories. As much as our stories matter, so do the science. Respectfully, Tamika Felder, founder of Survivor and 25-year cervical cancer survivor.
Thank you, Ms. Felder. I think it's probably safe to say people on the panel, probably most people in this room, including myself, I mean, we don't dispute the fact that vaccines can be helpful and save lives. I think you can dispute some of the claims, but again, I've never been an anti-vaxxer.
Oh,
My
really?
concern here, and one of the reasons I hold this hearings is there's just
That's not true. He's definitely an anti-vaxxer. He literally spoke at the Children's Health Defense Conference in November about how dangerous
at our
mRNA
Voice the
vaccines
Vaccine
are.
Injured, a mother, Emily Tarso, whose daughter, 20-year-old daughter, died 18 days after she received her 3rd shot of Gardasil, the HPV vaccine. After 8 years of litigation, this is how difficult it is to actually claim compensation through the government fund. Quote, HHS conceded by preponderance of the evidence, including challenge, re-challenge, that her daughter died from her HPV vaccination. They had no alternative explanation for her death. So again, I'm not a vaccine denier.
So that actually doesn't prove the
battling
HPV
vaccine
vaccine
injury
caused her death. That proves that she
But,
was
you know, Dr.
eligible for
Braylow,
compensation
you
for
mentioned
it.
that mRNA degrades very rapidly in the body. Is it your understanding and belief that the mRNA in the COVID injections is that type of mRNA?
That is my understanding.
Have you?
Because that's
so you don't
correct.
realize that that's not true mRNA. It's modified. It's modified pseudouridine. Is that the? So it doesn't degrade.
No,
You're
it
obviously not
degrades
aware of
more
some of the studies
slowly
that
than
show that
regular
the
mRNA,
spike is
but it
and the
still
mRNA
degrades
is
within about
circulating in the
24 to
body up to
48
2
hours.
years. We haven't studied it longer than that, but it's stayed in this body that long, attaching to the cells. As long as I'm on this track, was it your belief that the injection would stay in the arm? We were told that.
So he's talking about the spike
stay
protein,
there,
which is
create
made
antibodies. The
from
mRNA was
the
gonna degrade very
mRNA
quickly,
that
and
is in the vaccine. That's what
why it's so safe.
mRNA does. It
Is that your
encodes
understanding
a
that the
sequence of amino
your belief
acids
that
that
the
is turned into a
injection stays in
protein.
the arm?
Spike protein, your
I
immune
think
system
the
recognizes
effects of
it.
the injection are total body.
And he's talking about the
immune
spike
response,
protein
the reaction.
that is
But I
made
mean,
from the mRNA.
So you're aware the modified mRNA was encapsulated in a lipid nanoparticle, correct? So do you believe that package stayed in the arm as we were told it was going to do?
For the most part, it does.
I can't reliably comment on
So
that.
So again, you're saying how safe and effective this is, but you don't know how it works.
I do know how it works. It incites an immune reaction, as vaccines do.
Okay, how does it incite that immune reaction? What does
By-
it do? What does it actually do?
mRNA is translated into the spike
It
protein, and
brings
that
the
stimulates the
immune
immune
cells,
system.
To recognize the COVID
But
protein.
how does it have the?
Do you really want to know about
Are you aware
EJ
that
recombination and how
lipid
T cell and
nanoparticle
B cell
delivers
receptors
its
are made, Ron
modified
Johnson?
mRNA to a cell?
I don't think you do.
That mRNA, that modified mRNA is injected into the cell. and then it turns the cell into a factory of the spike protein, which is toxic. to the
No,
body.
then it
Are you
recruits
aware
the
that that's
translational machinery,
how it
including the
creates immunity?
ribosome, and it makes protein just like
mRNA in
all
the
other
vaccine
mRNAs do.
does get into cells, and it codes for a protein
Spike,
once it is inside the cell.
correct.
Are you aware of the DNA contamination
I'm
found
not-
in these
DNA
vials? If the mRNA
contamination
being injected in
is
the cell, well, gee,
very
gee,
much
maybe some
being
of this
disputed,
DNA, which
and
is
the
way
article
beyond the
that
levels
shows this
accepted by the
is
FDA
currently
could also
being
be injected in the cell.
investigated.
Are you aware of that?
I am aware that the mRNA that is injected does not get into our own DNA, and I am not aware of
Correct.
reliable data saying that within the vaccine itself that the DNA levels are
So
high.
you said
Reliable
there
data
is
being
no
the key term there.
clinical evidence proving these injections cause cancer. What would you require for proof? How would you ever prove that?
I believe that we can put some boundaries around how much of an effect could be happening with respect to causing or accelerating cancer, because we have not seen an overall increase in cancer rates in the
Indeed.
vaccinated U.S. population. In
Or
order
any
to
other
prove
vaccinated
it, we
population
would
for that
need
matter.
a randomized clinical trial where patients were equal in both arms.
Yep.
One would have a placebo or no vaccine, and the other would get the vaccine. And we would need to follow long-term.
So observational studies, clinical observation.
No, a randomized clinical
There is no-
trial is
there's no
actually a
evidence.
controlled
I think it's
study.
hypothesis generating. I do think there are major differences between people who choose to have vaccines, who are more health engaged, and those who choose not to.
So I was sent apparently a study that's going to be discussed in the June 8th to 9th President's Cancer Panel by Chairman Harvey Risch. And apparently,
Oh, boy.
and I don't know what this stands for, the U.S. SEER, SEER.
Surveillance and Epidemiologic Evidence
Thank you.
Registry.
SEER is actually easy to say. This is what Dr. Risch wanted me to talk about this. Leukemias are generally the shortest latency cancers and thus would be the first empirical signs to see pandemic-related effects. U.S. SEER cancer incidence data for 2023 were recently released. It is clear that for 2023, there are substantial incidence increases above the trend line for all, both sexes, males, both sexes, for every cohort. They have instant increases above the trend line. These charts appear to be the first U.S. data showing that an association between COVID-19 infection and vaccination and leukemias may be possible and should be confirmed by additional data as they become available. Again, I think it's a pretty balanced statement, but we have Dr. Itty, who has just laid out plausible mechanisms, concerned. We have Dr. Dalglish, who saw it in his clinic, was highly concerned. Again, I hear from a lot of doctors also see it clinically, observationally. Dr. Itty talked about the cancers seeing, at the site, in the neck. I mean, wouldn't that be indications of causation?
Who gets a
Is that
vaccine
something
in their
we want to
neck?
research?
I do believe
How is that the site of
we
injection?
should research this. I think just because there may be some biologic plausibility, because we've seen single cases where a cancer is diagnosed immediately after a vaccine or in the region, that doesn't mean it began developing at that exact point in time. So let's distinguish between when it developed and when it was diagnosed.
So let
Indeed,
me
Dr.
address the
Grabo
other
here
briefing
is
that was
actually an
stated in the
expert on
article.
oncogenesis,
There
or the
literally
process
was
by which cancer
biodistribution
develops.
studies in
So
rats that said the
she would actually know about some,
all over the body.
causes of cancer.
Accumulate in ovaries and adrenal glands, that type of thing. So we do know now that they lied to us. I was going to say they are biodistributed all over the body. And in
They
doing
lied
so,
to
then
us.
this little package with modified mRNA that wasn't going to degrade is going to enter cells all over the body, in the heart.
That's just simply not true,
turning those
Ron
lymphatic
Johnson.
cells
Like,
into
none of this is
manufacturers of a
actually true, what you're saying
toxic
right now.
spike protein that
This has never been
what does the body
shown.
do when
Like,
there's a
protein is not
spike
toxic.
protein on
This
a
is
cell?
dumb. Unbelievably dumb.
I would first of all argue that what happens in mice is not necessarily what happens in
No.
humans.
This
Where
happens
is
in
it?
humans. Okay, they knew it before.
Oh,
they knew
it
when they
happens in
lied to us.
humans,
They
right.
knew
What
it was
journal
gonna
is it
biodistribute.
published
That's the
in,
point
Ron?
of the study in mice. They knew it, and now we know it because this is disturbing. One final question. does it concern you, as it concerns my other cancer doctors here, oncologists, that spike protein is being found in tumors?
I think we need to further investigate this, explore it.
You know what's also
look
in
at how
tumors?
common this is.
Blood.
And I am a scientist. I do believe that we
You know what ends
should
up in the blood
research,
sometimes?
do the research,
Get
and have
infected with
definitive
first
proof,
coronavirus
not
too?
single cases
Spike protein.
or population
There
data
is-
where the populations
I would
are
say there's
different.
no such thing as definitive proof, and we'll get to that later
You
after.
can't distinguish spike protein from the
Thanks,
vaccine
Mr.
from
Chairman.
spike protein from the virus.
Dr. Graylow, you are the Chief Medical Officer and Executive Vice President for the Association for Clinical Oncology, and you're a professor, you're a clinician, and your organization represents more than 50,000 oncology professionals who care for people with cancer. And your testimony, and by the way, I'm sorry I wasn't here personally, but I have read it a couple of times, is that there is, quote, no clinical evidence proving that mRNA COVID-19 vaccines cause cancer, end quote. That's the predominant view of the 50,000 medical professionals who are part of your association, correct?
Correct, and it's also a statement on our own U.S. National Cancer Institute's website, a direct quote from the NCI's website.
And your testimony, based on scientific evidence now, is that RNA, I'm quoting, breaks down quickly in the body and does not enter a person's DNA. In other words,
Correct.
mRNA cannot cause gene mutations, end quote. Correct?
That's correct, and it's not gene therapy
So
for that
whatever the
reason
need
as
for
well.
more research, that's the science that exists right now. Correct?
That is the science.
And that's the science that ought to guide clinicians, and does now, in fact, guide them in prescribing vaccines for
It
people
sure
who suffer from
should.
cancer, tragically, because COVID-19 doesn't help them if they suffer from both cancer and COVID-19, does it? COVID-19 just weakens them.
We have good data that cancer patients who are generally more vulnerable, they have weakened immune systems from their therapies. Those who got vaccinated in a couple of different registries did better, had better survival than those who did
They're
not.
not dying of COVID, and they're immunosuppressed
The
because they are on
tremendous
cancer
advances that you
therapy.
describe in your testimony, and you've just come back from a major conference, so you're about as up to date as possible.
The conference
developing
that the professional society that is
individual
in charge of
personalized
just through.
immunotherapy,
So at least the
based on
Democrats brought a real cancer expert to the
mRNA as a
table.
platform, is the result of scientific research that goes back years, correct? Maybe decades.
That's what led to the development of the COVID vaccines. We were researching mRNA vaccines to treat cancer.
The developers of the COVID-19 vaccine, were standing on the shoulders of that basic research.
Correct.
So in your opinion, how,
Indeed.
I want to ask this as objectively as possible, how impactful is the administration's decision ending research grants for NIH or other government agencies on basic science to the health of this nation?
I think decreasing research funding is a threat that will slow down progress. It will slow down the United States' preeminence as the hub for research, a really respected hub for cancer research. Ideas like you all heard, I'm sure it was on the front page of the papers, this new RAS inhibitor that's a major breakthrough for pancreatic cancer. That started with basic research funded by the National Cancer Institute, then taken into industry, a home run, I called it a grand slam, for pancreatic cancer that's applicable to lung cancer, colon cancer. That is the kind of basic research. Everybody said this RAS target is undruggable. You could have said, then let's not investigate it. Let's stop. It's undruggable. But basic research funding from our government is what pushed ahead and found
Exactly
a
right.
workaround and found a way
And-
that's going to
and
majorly
stopping it-
impact.
Stopping it will cost lives.
That's right.
Correct.
Sorry.
If we don't know how these things
Stopping
work, how
this
are we supposed to
research
develop therapies
will
against them?
cost
How are we
lives.
supposed to develop
Absolutely.
cancer vaccines or therapeutics?
Ms. Felder, I want to thank both you and Dr. Graylow for being here today, but particularly yourself in sharing your personal story. You've had the opportunity to watch some of the administration's shifts in the CDC's main vaccine advisory panel.
Here we go.
When it comes to
ACIP
the
time.
HPV vaccine. What do you think is likely to happen to cervical cancer rates in this country if these baseless attacks on HPV vaccine continue?
Sadly, more people will die. And when we look at this
Or
2
women will
decades
die.
from now, it will be horrendous.
Or lose their
And
fertility.
we also know that that HPV vaccine protects from more than just cervical cancer.
And you have been through that moment when a doctor says to you, and I can't claim to quote what your doctor said to you, but in effect, I have some news I need to tell you, and we think you'll be okay, but this is serious, and here's the diagnosis. How does it make you feel, or how would it make you feel if you knew that these vaccines that could have saved a lot of lives, including maybe yours, are being attacked?
Honestly, it's infuriating at some points because no one in the United States of America should die of cervical cancer. But yet,
Nope.
as I read just a few names, people are dying of it. And while we have other countries, Rwanda, Scotland, Australia, who are working towards cervical cancer elimination, Denmark, there's no reason that the United States of America should be lagging so far behind.
And there's no reason we should be in lagging competition with other countries, but most important, that we should forego any kind of treatment or discourage people with myth and misinformation from seeking
With
treatment
lies.
that may
Senator Blumenthal, you
save
can call them what they are.
their lives.
With lies.
Correct?
We have to really get a handle on the misinformation because misinformation causes more deaths.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to stop that.
Well, thank you very much. I
You're welcome.
apologize to the panel and Mr. Chairman, to you. I have a hearing of the Veterans Affairs Committee. I'm the ranking member there, and I really apologize, but I want to thank you for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranking Member Blumenthal. Misinformation. Let's talk about one of the great lies told during COVID. It's been repeated now here a number of times. This is not normal mRNA. This is modified. So my five witnesses, who's best qualified to describe exactly what the mRNA was
Oh,
in
goody.
those injections?
Let's see.
Dr. Ladiri.
Mm-hmm.
So the mRNA is modified with pseudouridine.
Actually, I got that right.
This won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago. And it was a way to make mRNA stable because mRNA.
So it didn't degrade. This doesn't degrade in days. I mean, my staff is just, and we'll enter this study in the record, showed me the study that 700 days. It was studied and found still circulating the body. So that's 700
Okay,
days.
I want to
That's
see
close to
this
2 years.
reference.
And they haven't extended the study beyond that. But go ahead.
I love
So
this
think
RNA that sticks around
more
for
research needs to be done
2
about the
years.
mechanisms of persistence, but it was unexpected, along with a number of other things that were observed after the vaccines were rolled out. And so you mentioned biodistribution.
So he's not
um,
answering the question, in other
contaminants
words.
that you mentioned.
He's just going to go on a laundry list of all the things that he thinks cause
far as-
Including SV40, correct?
SV40.
SV40, here we go. It's
origin,
actually not
cancer sequence, not the
SV40,
full
which is
SV40
yeah, it's not.
sequence,
He's right
but
about that.
when
It's
the
just a tiny little
SV40
promoter sequence that was
enhancer
probably in a
promoter
cloning
sequences, if they
vector.
find their way into the human genome, they can drive oncogenes.
Yeah, see, that's if it's large.
So if they're containing that lipid nanoparticle,
Promoters don't just integrate into
and the
upstream of
lipid
block
nanoparticle
one, your favorite oncogene
allows the
named after
transfection
yourself,
of the
and cause
mRNA in the
turbo
cell.
cancer.
The
Not how
DNA
it works,
contaminant
dude.
can enter the cell as well, correct?
The lipid
Certainly possibilities. It's certainly no clinical proof.
So Ron Johnson
Talk-
doesn't
talk to
understand
me
what
about
transfection is
I mean,
beyond
is
getting
there
into the cell.
literally ever
The reason for this lipid
definitive proof
nanoparticle
of-
is
this
that it
is-
allows
by
the
the way, it's driving me
mRNA that
nuts
is packaged
as
within
we
it to get through the
talk to
cell
people,
membrane and
you know,
into
FDA,
the cytoplasm
NIH,
of the cell, which is normally
CDC
where
that turn a
mRNA,
blind's eye
when
to
makes
the
all the
safety
time,
signals that we're
gets
screaming at
translated
them.
into protein.
And they always go back
This
to
is
it.
one
We have
mRNA
definitive
that
proof.
encodes the spike protein
So
in its
I will
pre-fusion
say that
stabilized
a
form,
number of
which is the
different
most immunogenic.
laboratories and scientists,
The
including I
protein
think one at
itself
the
does not
FDA,
last for very long
published
after
a
it's made, a
report.
few days.
And you
The
know,
mRNA
finding
does
the,
last longer than conventional
DNA
host
was very, very
mRNA.
hard. And a bunch of
That's
high school students did
made
it
from
for
within,
some-
homegrown.
They were high school
So it does
students,
have
correct?
pseudouridine in it,
It
which
really was. They were
delays
using high school
degradation of the mRNA.
And
So for a
but
couple
the,
days,
other,
it's just so that you can
scientists
make
who
more
found
spike
this
protein and have a
reproducing
larger,
labs
more
in different vials,
immunostimulatory
published
immune
papers,
response that
Dr.
will be
Kevin
more likely to
McKernan, Dr.
generate
David
a
Spiker,
memory response, which
Dr.
will
Jess,
continue to protect you
Rose,
after your initial
published
spike
a
of
paper
antibodies wears off.
that looked at many vaccine vials over a number of years and
Here we go with the
documented
SV40
high
stuff.
levels, and they compared Moderna and Pfizer lots and found much higher levels than the FDA threshold, which was developed or put into effect decades ago for naked DNA, not DNA
Okay.
that's wrapped in lipid.
Oh, shut the
nanoparticles
fuck up,
that
Wafik. Okay,
take
here's
the DNA
here's what he
into
is just
the
totally
human
full
cell.
of shit about.
Dr.
Right?
Davis, you look like you wanted
When you
to add
make
something.
Any
Trying to
kind of RNA
address
or
the definitive
DNA,
proof.
nucleic acid
'Cause if
product,
that's what's required, we'll
Um,
never warn the public about
you
possible dangers.
you need to use what's called a
Right? I mean,
plasmid,
I always
usually,
thought
and that
personally
encodes
the FDA's
the
role
DNA
was to
form, which is
search
much
for
more
safety
stable.
signals.
The
That's why
mRNA
using these
sequence.
incredibly
And you
sophisticated
make a bunch of
algorithms and,
RNA
this
using a
mass
technique called in vitro
database, looking for the
transcription.
small little safety signals so that they could
This is
understand that
just
so they can warn the
mRNA,
public, they can warn
basically
medical
made with a
doctors.
slightly chemically modified
They
form
denied the
of
safety signals,
the
and then
T
as
in
we talked to them,
ATG, which in
definitive proof, so
RNA
we
is a
couldn't go to the
U.
American
Actually,
public
it's
without
called
definitive proof.
uridine.
So talk a little bit about that.
In this case,
Thank you
they've
very
just
much.
slightly modified the
The
uridine.
problem
so
is
it sticks
that
around
people
a little
thought they
bit longer.
understood
That's
RNA,
it.
so-called
Sometimes the
vaccines.
DNA from the
RNA
plasmids
is an
that they
actual
use, a little bit of it gets
messenger
in
the
there.
body, and it
It's not
lasts
a big
about
deal because
20
it's not going to
seconds
integrate into your
before it's
genome and it's not
gobbled
going to cause turbo
So if you were
cancer.
to insert that, it would never be there long enough to induce an immune response. So what they had to do was make it and put a structure in it, that's the pseudouridine, so that it would last a bit longer. And they told us that it would go to the arm and it would be gone in 48 hours.
It
And
is,
to
for the
sum
most
up
part.
What we're hearing is this is anything but the truth, because the important part here is
No,
the LNP.
Angus,
liposomal
because you are
nanoparticle,
using a bunch of
because that
bullshit
takes it
studies
into
written
the
by all of
center
your
of the
anti-vax
nucleus,
friends that show
whereby
this.
it can get
These aren't
inserted.
actually
And the
published
thing
in
about
respectable
RNA,
journals, and this
it
actually
is
is
like
the data
herding
that
cats.
supports
You
this in the way
cannot
that you
tell
say that
it
it
where
does.
to go.
Takes
Where
it into
to
the
go
center
to.
of the
Remember, I
nucleus.
sat on the board of a company developing these things, particularly for cancer, and essentially we realized that all the evidence is you will never be able to harness these things.
Because you couldn't control where it went, correct?
This is so dumb, okay? Once the mRNA gets into the cell, it does not go into the nucleus for the most part. But even if it did, it would not integrate into the DNA because RNA and DNA are different molecules, and RNA is single-stranded. Messenger RNA is one. No, DNA is a double helix And there are good
131
reasons why
have been reported
mRNA
to
and
the FDA.
DNA
So
don't
you have to
usually
accept
link
this is an
because
extremely dangerous thing to have
guess what?
pouring
mRNA
into
is
your body
made in the
continually,
nucleus.
year
It's
after
made
year.
from
And
DNA,
you bring
and it's
forward the
not
chances
routinely
of every chronic
integrating
disease
into
you've
the
got,
nucleus or
which is
into
why
the
those of us
genomic
who've looked at
DNA
the data,
the way that they're
years
claiming.
and years of
What they are
developing
referring
and
to
making
are some
vaccines
studies
safe,
that were done
etc.,
with a
have said
cell line that is
it
not
cannot be
remotely
done
comparable to
by
the cells in your arm or
respication.
anywhere
But
else in
there's
your
no
body.
proof.
They
So
contain
the
things called
second
line transposons, which
medical
allow for
professional
this type
doctor
of integration to
witness
happen.
the
It's
Democrats
an
brought in here
experimental system.
that
It
did
has
not
no
understand that
relevance
this
to
was
the
not
real
true
world,
mRNA.
and these people
I
are
just find that
believing it.
shocking. And this is, I knew this from the beginning. I'm not a doctor. I was schooled in what this mechanism was. That's why there's no way I was ever going to get that injection.
Right. It's unfortunate that you were schooled in this mechanism because
I
it's
didn't
not
need
true.
definitive proof that it could cause harm. I thought this is dangerous. This is something
What
I
is
don't want
what is this
to deal with at
definitive
all.
proof? Like one
And
of
now
these
we just
anti-vaxxer
have
quacks told you that?
these medical professionals
Medical
that are
professional.
relying on
Sorry.
studies. I want to get to this because the big part of this hearing is how corrupted science has become.
Oh,
Does
okay.
it surprise any of you who have been attacked because you've conducted research as a study that's outside the narrative that disproves the fact, for example, that the mRNA is not true mRNA, that the studies that show that it has no problems, those things get funded, right? Think anybody attacks those?
Yeah, no. Well, not on this basis because those studies are using
Talk
evidence.
about the Surgisphere study that tanked
Oh, God.
hydroxychloroquine
The
during the midst of the
Surgisphere
pandemic when
study.
we were just literally.
They're about to tell
we
you
should
how
have been
this is
doing
an
everything we
example
could
how
to
all the
treat
journals
the
are
disease.
completely corrupt. This is
Dr.
one
Hazen, are you
journal,
familiar with the Surgisphere
one journal
study
article that was published in the New England Journal of
totally
Medicine
bogus
has been
data.
retracted
and
for a
was retracted,
methodological
but
problem.
didn't really hear much of a hue and cry in the press, did we?
Yeah,
No, and in
actually, people
fact, it
complained
was
about this quite a lot.
fraudulent study that was written by a non-medical, and
That's
the
why it was
media went
retracted,
crazy to
Sabine.
destroy hydroxychloroquine and create the narrative that hydroxychloroquine was dangerous when hydroxychloroquine was given to millions of people with arthritis before, and we never had any problems.
Yeah, it was also
And all
given
of a
to a lot
sudden,
of people
the
for
study comes out
COVID,
of
and it
nowhere
was
and
shown
starts
in
quoting
many other
patients that had
studies,
COVID
not
in
the
Australia.
Surgisphere study,
Australia
that
didn't
have
even
not been
have COVID at the
retracted,
time that
that
the
it
paper was
doesn't fucking
published.
work to treat COVID.
So,
And
this
neither
is the
does your little
problem. You have these papers
bifidobacteria
that are coming out, they get into these
solution.
fancy journals. It was an embarrassment for the Lancet, frankly,
Oh,
because it
sorry, it
started
was in the
waking up
Lancet, not the New
physicians
England
that
Journal.
we cannot trust the medical literature. That was the first for me. Remember,
Actually, I
I
think it
come
was in
from
the
the
New
world
England
of
Journal.
clinical
She's
trials,
the one who's wrong.
and as a clinical trial doctor, my number one thing is, yes, we look at, is the drug better than placebo? But ultimately, we also look at serious adverse events. And we also look at signals that tell us this is wrong. There were so many things that happened during the pandemic that, it changed me as a physician that was doing clinical trials, because all of a sudden I'm like listening to this.
Of course it changed you because you're doing clinical trials on quack remedies that don't work.
Especially in the microbiome space, you get to see that anything you put on your skin, you put a topical product on your skin, it has a potential of killing your microbiome. The skin has blood
Then what will
vessels,
happen?
has nerves, muscles underneath.
Oh, you
So
mean the skin is an
nothing that you
organ?
inject or put topical just stays in that area.
Plus, isn't it true the lipid nanoparticle was literally designed
Yes.
to permeate difficult permeate? It was designed to do that. So they knew that,
Yes.
and they lied to us. That's why we don't have trust in science.
Well, that
We
was,
also don't. By the way, we also don't have trust in science. because of
No,
who
see, we
funds it.
know we did put that in there so that it would
Who funds
transfect
the
cells.
organization?
There is
Who's a
literally
major
nothing
funder
wrong with the
of our
vaccine,
society?
even if it did go throughout
Our
the body,
society
like going
is
throughout the
funded
body.
by membership,
It literally
by
spike protein
registrations to our
is not
meetings,
bad
by
for
industry
you.
sponsorship
mRNA
of our
with
meetings,
pseudouridine is not
by
bad
our
for
journal
you.
subscriptions from nonprofits and individuals.
Here
And
we
Big
go.
Pharma.
That was the-
Millions
that's the
and millions
industry.
and millions of dollars from Big Pharma.
It goes to support our meetings
Right.
or
I
our
know you get
journals.
millions and millions, just like the media gets billions of dollars from Big Pharma, so they don't do investigative journalism on these vaccine injuries. Ms. Felder.
I'm just curious if Ron Johnson thinks we should have any kind of drugs at all or any kind of medications. He seems to hate big pharma so much.
Or something in the
What are you
environment
going to do with all this
or a
turbo
drug or
cancer
a
that's
vaccine
happening? You're just going to treat it
that
with
would
like a
increase your
fecal
chances of getting
transplant, but
cancer. Wouldn't you
Sabine,
like to know that?
Absolutely.
shit woman Hazen is going to sell you?
Dr. Grillo, again, I believe, I just want to, do you agree that the FDA and the CDC, their job, after giving emergency use authorization for something or approving something, and they're doing safety surveillance, isn't their job to look at all the data and try and suss out, try and determine where are those safety signals that we might
Pretty
miss
sure that that's
without
what
our
they do.
sophisticated models? I mean, we've got to find those safety signals so then we can put.
You know, it's
for
funny.
example,
I'm the
warnings on the Health
co-editor-in-chief
Network.
of a journal called
So to
Vaccine.
warn clinicians, be on the
And the
lookout
former
for this.
top vaccine
And in
regulator at
case
the
we're seeing more
FDA
of this adverse
forced
reaction to
FDA scientists
Vioxx
to
or
withdraw a
okay?
paper from my journal
Shouldn't it
because
be
it
that
showed
way?
that COVID vaccines
Isn't that what
work
the
and
FDA
are
ought to do?
safe. That was part of this
Well,
ongoing
yeah,
effort to look for safety signals.
Part of the FDA's job.
Have you read our report from 4 weeks ago?
Right.
I
The
have-
problem was the
So
top
let me
vaccine
summarize it for
regulator
the
at the
audience.
FDA
March
decided that
1st,
it didn't like the FDA doing its
2021.
job because it showed that the
Peter
vaccines were
Marks
safe.
Saber, that's the group within FDA that approves vaccines and then does safety surveillance, was given a briefing by Dr. Anna Sharfsman. She was one of their data mining experts who was working with the inventor of the algorithm who worked with Oracle. So he was given a multi-page briefing.
I thought you guys like Oracle. That's owned by Larry Ellison. His son's currently taking apart CBS News in your favor.
And quite honestly, it's very easy to see why, because prior to the COVID injections, we had on average about 280 deaths per year
Oh, I see.
reported to VAERS associated with the vaccine.
Back to Peter Marks and
2021 was
Mr.
21,000.
algorithm for analyzing this, which is just called
Roughly,
like
this is just
doing
let's
data
say there's 10,000
analysis.
deaths associated with the Pfizer vaccine, 10,000 deaths associated with Moderna, and then 280 deaths with all the vaccines. If you look at Pfizer and compare it to Moderna, so 10,000 Pfizer compared to Moderna 10,280. Well, they're equally dangerous, but they're equally safe. Turn around, look at Moderna at 10,000 deaths, compare that to Pfizer 10,280. Equally dangerous, equally safe. So it's obvious to me how that algorithm, when you've got such an unusual situation.
Real quick, what's 280 divided by 10,000? And by the way, there's nowhere near 280 deaths from the vaccine in 10,000 doses
So
administered.
he was warned that it was going to hide them. 26 days
No
later,
vaccine with those kind of numbers would ever be approved. And by the way, if those numbers existed, they would be extremely obvious.
Did max. It showed that the system they were using had 49 cases of severe masking. Then they show them 25 safety signals. Put up the chart here.
Oh, let's see the chart.
This is the first list. Okay? So you've got sudden cardiac death, you've got Bell's palsy, you have pulmonary infarction, you've got stroke, you got basal gargle stroke, a lot of things like that.
How is one
this
of the
serious
events
stuff.
COVID-19 immunization
Senior officials of the FDA were shown this.
or a SARS-2 test?
For 3 consecutive months, they kept doing more data runs, showing more
I mean, that
cases
should just show
of
you
potential
like
sudden death.
exactly how severe these events are. They're listing as
Again,
a severe
I don't
adverse
think the FDA
event. You've
officials
got
are-
another COVID
Thank you,
shot.
Dr. Schwarzman. Man, thank you. God bless you for alerting us to this thing so we can alert.
God bless
the
you
doctors
for
and the
alerting
medical
us to the
establishment.
fake
I
analysis
think that's what
that
they did.
shows this incorrect anti-vaxxer conclusion.
They told her
God
to buzz
bless
off.
you.
They told her to cease and desist. It's not your job. Go away. You're a pest. And they continue to use that algorithm that they knew were hiding safety signals, so they could go
Go away, you're a
this
pest.
day in live and say, well,
No,
we just
actually
weren't
go
seeing
away
safety
because you're
signals.
making shit
Yeah,
up.
we saw them. They just closed their eyes. And now when we talk to them, I'm asking you because you said.
Boy, I want to close my ears.
When we talk to the people involved in this.
Oh,
that's
we just
their
weren't
excuse.
seeing the safety signals right because
Well,
they don't
this wasn't
exist.
definitive proof.
And they only exist when you do some kind of whack-ass
Dr.
cherry-picked analysis that will
Is there
make
ever
safety
definitive
signals that
proof?
didn't exist before.
I mean, definitive.
See, there was actually a process in
No
place,
doubt.
there still
That's
is,
you're shoving the brain.
that regulatory
their definitive
agencies
proof
like
how
the
that person
FDA
died.
use to investigate
But medically, when you
and that
die
the
from
CDC
all
and
you
the
have
Advisory
all-
Committee on
would you actually
Immunization
die?
Practices
It's
used in
kinda
their
hard,
work
isn't
groups
it?
to
Yeah,
investigate
I mean,
safety
when you make a
signals.
diagnosis in medicine, you go on the strength of the evidence. It's very difficult to get complete and total proof. I mean, look at what happened
Okay.
with big
Well,
tobacco, smoking, and lung cancer.
what is
first
the
evidence
strength
that
of the
emerged
evidence,
that there was a link
Steve?
between smoking and lung cancer until there was actually regulation curbing tobacco consumption. It took 50 years because the tobacco industry launched a campaign to deny the smoking caused lung cancer. They
Sure,
did
but
research
also
on
the
cancer.
evidence that
Back
smoking
in the day,
did
they
cause
saw a lot
lung
of ads
cancer
on
was
TV.
really insurmountable.
yeah.
So the
Did they
tobacco
actually
industry's
fund medical
propaganda
associations?
campaign actually eventually couldn't
So
overcome
on
it
Well, again,
Yeah.
history
because
doesn't
too many
teach that, but it
people
sure
were getting
rhymes.
lung cancer and
But I think on
strokes
that
and
topic as well,
emphysema from
Senator Johnson, I
smoking.
think there's
That's why I quit. It's a
there are a
totally
few
different story
real
because
truths that
nobody's
people need
dying
to
from
understand to
COVID
bust some myths here.
vaccination.
First of all, medicine is not an exact science. We keep hearing this, Anthony Fauci uses this term, trust the science, trust the science. And when I heard that, I thought, that's the most unscientific statement I've ever heard in my life. Because medicine is an applied science. It's a social science. It's constantly evolving. The father of the evidence-based medicine movement, David Sackett, said
Sure.
50% of what you learn in medical school will turn out to be either outdated or dead wrong within 5 years
Right.
of graduation.
So
The trouble is
what
nobody can
Fauci
tell you what's
meant by
off.
trust the
You have to
science
learn to
is
learn on
trust
your
the
own. So that's one
scientific
thing you have to
method where we
understand.
develop
Because what that means
hypotheses
is it's open to
and then we
manipulation.
attempt to
And if you
test
look at
them.
the current
The
status of
hypothesis
the medical
fails the
industrial
test.
complex,
That means the
we have
hypothesis
this
is invalid.
misinformation
It's an
nest. To quote John
evidence-based
Ioannidis,
way
professor of
of
medicine at
determining
Stanford, the
what's
most cited
true or
medical
not.
researcher in
This
the
is
world,
literally the entire
2017, in his
scientific
paper, How to
method, and it
Survive
applies to
Medical
medicine as
Misinformation
well as every
And he
other
points out
form
that
of
20
science.
to 50% of all
It is
healthcare activity in the United
hypothesis-driven
States
research
brings no benefit to the
investigation.
patient, is wasteful or harmful. And what is the main root cause of that problem?
Root cause.
Because
There we
most
go.
doctors
He's a
are
functional
unaware of
medicine
the poor
grifter.
quality research that
You can
drives
always
their
tell
clinical
these guys, they
decision-making.
all use
The
the same
pharmaceutical companies,
catchphrases.
they direct
They all
the
talk
agenda.
about
They
controlling the
design
narrative.
the trials. They
Root
analyze their own
causes.
research. They then give, summary results of their research to the regulators, such as the FDA and in the UK, the MHRA.
Corporate
problem we've got
capture
now
of regulatory
is that there's no
bodies, corporate
open
capture of the
transparency and
US
independence
government,
because
corporate capture
50
of
to 65%
the
of
real
the funding of
science.
the FDA comes from big pharma.
Only these
In the
brave
UK, 80 to 60%
whistleblowers
of the
like
funding comes from
Malhotra
big pharma.
here, who
So what
makes, I
you've
think, a
created
considerable
is
profit
really a
from his
misinformation mess
activities,
with biases
and also
all
has
the way
some pretty
through down
serious
to the,
political interests in
what
this.
happens in the consultation room. And
You
ultimately
know,
what happens
he's
is you have
just in
an
this for
exaggerated
trying to
safety and
figure
benefit
out what's going on with
invariably
the
of almost
evidence.
every single drug that has come on the market. And that's the real problem, the root cause of this issue that we're trying to deal with.
So, Dr. Ladiri, I'm going to put up a chart that was inside a exhibit you'd presented to us.
Here
Again,
we
you've been
go.
around for quite a few
Looking
years.
forward to this.
Dr. Graylow, are you familiar with Dr. Ladiri in the cancer field?
Absolutely. And I actually serve on the scientific advisory group for his WIN consortium for precision oncology.
So would you consider him a highly respected oncologist and cancer researcher?
I have always respected Dr. Aldiri.
Well, somebody on PubPeer doesn't. So Dr. Ladiri, why don't you quick explain what this chart shows, and again, the relationship to when you started publishing things like, maybe the origin of the coronavirus maybe isn't holding true. Maybe that was man-made.
Oh, okay.
Is that about when that happened, about
Tony
2024?
Fauci made, you mean?
And all of a sudden you started getting all these requests for information on your past studies. Just kind of describe the torment you've gone through.
The torment.
So back in 2020, a paper was published in Nature Medicine in around April, and it has become controversial.
Proximal origin of SARS coronavirus 2. It has not become controversial except for all of these lab leakers like Aldiri keep saying that it's some sort of conspiracy that Tony Fauci used to cover up the fact that he funded gain-of-function research that led to the creation of SARS coronavirus 2. Research that I have done with my colleagues, including the authors of the proximal origin paper, at least 4 of them, demonstrates that it resulted from natural spillover, 2 of them, in the Huanan seafood market in Wuhan, China. It was a naturally occurring pandemic, other than the fact that it occurred within the man-made animal.
COVID is literally gene therapy.
But in the
He
case of
doesn't know what he's
HPV,
talking
you're not
about.
vaccinating with E6. E6 targets P53.
But again, address the ramp up of attacks.
He's now claiming
Give
that
me a
the
timeline.
HPV vaccine is dangerous because of the E6 protein in HPV. He's ignoring the fact that the HPV vaccine is a virus-like particle that doesn't actually express the E6 protein.
You attenuate, you block the tumor suppressor, P53. This is the most common.
I love this graph. This is so much fun. Look how many shitty papers he's written that every time he writes one, he gets a spike of pure responses. Sure, it has nothing whatsoever to do with the quality of those papers.
Against the virus, but limit
Must be a
collateral
conspiracy
damage
to
the host
silence him.
defenses. That shouldn't be controversial. Attacks started and continued. And then by the middle of 2025, I was invited to serve on an HHS committee. I was doing government service.
An ACIP work group,
look
actually, with
into
the all anti-vax
plausible
ACIP.
links,
Because they
and,
wanted you to manufacture
found a bunch of
turbo cancer
things that
evidence for
were
them, which you
worth,
gladly did.
studying more, and the attacks took off. We published that work by January. The journal where the article was published came under a cyber attack. Nobody in the world could access
The
it.
journal where the article was published, .. But
This is
I
when
am the
I
editor
was
in
connected
chief
with you
of.
and I started hearing
That's
this
what
story.
he should
You know,
say,
I would
because
call
he
it torment.
is.
You've been tormented. They're trying to destroy your career. They're doing a pretty good job of it, aren't they?
I'll say a couple of things.
Yes, his career's been destroyed.
all of
He's
these mounting
testifying in
concerns,
front of the Senate. He's probably making a
look-
shit ton of money
look
on the side. And didn't Dr.
concerning.
Graylow
They're
just talk
piling
about
up.
how
What's
she's
going on?
the head of the
Most of
consortium that
them
he directs
are
for precision
trivial,
oncology?
in my view. I mean,
And that she's
one
always
case
respected
was
him?
a
It doesn't
typographical
sound
error in the
like he's actually being
supplementary
destroyed.
table where we were looking at what does the body produce and people have
In
severe
fact, it
COVID.
certainly sounds like
And
he
we spelled the
isn't
word
being held accountable for
intubation,
potential
it's
scientific
spelled as
misconduct
intubation.
he's,
If you read
carried
that,
out.
that's a concern. And
I want to keep going here, but I'm
I'm concerned about the integrity of the peer review process at his journal, from one editor in chief to another. This is not how I handle this situation.
Of the torment you've been going through.
But that's also why I don't
Without
really
objection,
submit
without
papers
objection.
that often to
I
my
just wanna
own
make sure
journal.
I entered in the record that Dr. Harvey Risch, the seer, whatever that stands for, that study. One thing I'd recommend to anybody watching this, and these all be posted on our website too. There was a Substack
Every
piece
time I
written
look
by
at Harvey
Midwestern
Risch, I wish that I
doctor
could not
today.
see.
He was aware of this hearing. Put up that one.
I'm glad I'm not the only one with bad production
Again,
skills. Ron
here's
Johnson's
this
got
hearing.
the same
They
problem.
rigged clinical trials, or how they rigged clinical trials, and the price we all pay for it. I mean, I think that's the point. Say, listen, I feel sorry for you
Okay,
doctors
but
who
I
are paying a very
admittedly have
high
never
price
had to
for
look
being attacked because you're
for my
convinced.
how they
You're
rig
trying
clinical
to do
trial
real science,
evidence.
which is skeptical, trying to poke the holes in the consensus. Right? But the people who really pay is
Poking holes in the
we don't
consensus.
have a clue.
Why
And
trust the
lies told to
experts?
the public, that's why a growing percentage of Americans simply don't trust doctors.
We just don't
We're
trust
devoted to
doctors because you
hospitals
keep
trying
telling
to
us that
train,
they're
which,
full
by
of
the way,
shit.
the hearing we'll have is the hospital protocol.
Maybe it's because their senator keeps
but
saying that
this
they're
caught
these
my eye
criminals
in
who are
this piece right
impossibly
here.
corrupt and
This
incompetent,
is,
and they're all
what
being
kind of
so
chart is this
mean
for?
to
There's a
poor
name for
WAF
this.
one over here.
Pardon?
A forest plot.
There you go. Yeah, forest plot. And so this shows all the different types
Thank
of
God for
drugs
Dr. Graylow.
that people studied to treat COVID. And what's noteworthy about this, if you look at everything that has a red circle around it, or a red dotted deal, it wasn't. They were either in the guidelines or the red dotted rectangles. They were in the guidelines. And what's notable about them is, I'll just go down the list. I can't pronounce them. Casavir, $2,100. The other one's $1,200. The next one's $855. The next one is $1,200. Then Paxlovid, $529.
It's not that bad once you get down to aspirin.
Molnupiravir, $700. Remdesivir. By the way, that's what nurses call that is run, death is near, because it knocks out your kidneys. But $3,120.
How much you want to bet he's going to be bragging about how they're
Last one's
treating Ebola
$5,000.
patients
What
with
was
this
interesting
at their
is
little
the forest plot,
Kenyan Ebola prison
you get
that the
to
U.S. wants to build?
actually diet. It has a 50% efficacy. Everything else below that is below 50% efficacy. You know, ivermectin's up there 62% with 99 different studies, 137,000 patients. But again,
Those aren't real
this shows the
studies.
corruption within our medical system. You know, random controlled trials, who can afford to run those? Dr. Hazen, I mean, you spend a lot on trials. I mean, who can, you do a lot of, I would consider more observational trials, correct? I mean, onesies and, you know, ends of n equals 1 or whatever.
N equals 1. Yeah, that's not a trial. That's like
my
a
ways
study of
into
1%.
looking more at the microbiome. But I mean, there was a time I was doing clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies. And yes, pharmaceutical companies pay a lot of money to do clinical trials. And what most people don't know and what the public doesn't know is that you don't know what's in Paxlovid. For all you know, it's a couple drugs that are off-label on the market, but it's a trade secret. And the problem with that is that now they can bring that trade secret into the public at a high price. So who controls that price really? If you look at the stock market, you know, you want who's investing in these pharmaceutical companies. These stocks, you know, it's all about the price of the stock.
So again, let's get back to your, you know, so you had published out what I consider pretty important papers because, you know, again, we were, you know, you were keeping me up to date in terms of what you're doing. Pretty amazing stuff. I mean, you literally have nonverbal autistic children are talking. I've seen the videos, okay, and we couldn't do it because we couldn't pixelate the faces. But you've got a bunch of patients that you've treated.
I love this. They
maladies,
couldn't figure out how to
ALS,
pixelate the
ALS
faces
patients
of
alive.
nonverbal
Yes,
autistic
4.5
children
years.
talking. Maybe they weren't nonverbal.
But you were putting, again, these are FDA basically approved or monitored trials, right? And you write the papers on it, goes through 8 months of peer review. Why do you assume they were retracted? I mean, again, there's probably no definitive proof.
You
I mean,
can't,
what's your conjecture?
you can't make a business out of something that's published to the public, unfortunately. And, you know, pharmaceutical companies do spend a lot of
No,
money.
that's
on
not
clinical
true. You can
trials,
totally
and
make a
they
business
expect
out of something
to
that's
make
been
their money
published.
back
You can't get a
on capital
patent on
expenditures,
something
right?
that's
That
been
they've spent.
published
Which, by the way, just to
before
plug the
you
Midwestern doctor,
disclose that you
read this
invented
article because
it.
it shows you how they.
So
how
this
they
is
doctor,
actually a separate
how they
question.
rig clinical trials. This is
We're
this is
not
very
actually
interesting read.
talking
Okay, so if you're
about
watching the hearing, read this one.
starting a business.
I've been in the
We're
clinical
talking
trial
about patent
business,
protection.
Senator, for 3 decades. I know all the tricks.
I understand. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I know
you.
you know all the tricks, lady.
Yes.
You
so
sure do.
Unfortunately, you know, I've always stood by one thing. Good drugs come out and bad drugs stay out, okay? When a research is done poorly, it's time to get that drug out of the market, okay? I think we can all agree, as we still have COVID amongst us, COVID has not disappeared, that these vaccines have not done what they were supposed to do, right? They have not eradicated the virus, right?
That's not what vaccines are supposed to do,
amongst
Sabine.
us.
Vaccines,
therefore,
and I
we
want
have
to
to kinda
be
look
very
at, well,
clear
how do
to everybody
we
who's watching.
get better?
the
How do we
vaccines
get better as society? How do we
Vaccines are
stop
supposed to
killing
prevent
the
people from
microbiome?
dying
How
from
do
a
we improve
disease.
the microbiome?
Vaccines prevent
You know, science
disease.
is
They
only as
don't
good as
eradicate
science is
every single virus.
today until
It
the
is
new
not possible
technology
to
comes
eradicate
along.
respiratory
But when we
viruses like
destroy the
COVID
new
and flu.
technology that's
Vaccine
trying to
technology
come
that we
out, that's
currently
trying
have.
to say, hey, look at me,
Those
I'm the
viruses
microbiome,
are
and
not
you're
capable of being
suffocating that and
completely
you're censoring
neutralized,
that,
and
you're
those
not
vaccines are
allowing
not
it to
capable of
progress,
producing
and
completely
you just
sterilized
stop science. So
immunity
you just
the way that we
alluded
have
to
for
my
measles
2
or other
twins
viruses.
that resumed
So
speech
this is not what
after
they're
9
supposed to
months
do.
of
They have
manipulating
moved
the
the goalposts
microbiome
from
to
day one
improve
by
their
saying that the
microbiome, to
vaccines
get
have
rid of the bad
failed
microbes, to
because they
improve
are
the
not
microbiomes. Do
adhering
you know
to
how
this
many parents are
perfect
asking
standard
me,
that
can
nobody
you
ever
publish that?
applied
I
to them
can't
in the
publish. Do you
first
want to know
place.
why I can't publish or tell
You
the
can't
data?
publish
And I
it,
have
Sabine,
to
because
publish
your
because if I have
papers
to
are
if I want
bullshit.
to
That's
convince
why you can't
my
publish.
peers to do
Your
what I'm
papers
doing
can't
so they
pass
can
peer
reproduce the
review
data,
by
I
actual
have to
experts. So you
publish.
have to
So I
come on
can't
to the
just be on
Senate
social
hearing
media and say,
and complain
hey, look
that
at
you
what
are
I
being
need to do.
discriminated
Why
against
don't
by
you
the
publish?
status quo because we're
I can't
corrupt,
publish.
not
I've
that
had
you are
4 papers. You
incompetent.
know, science is
Because they
And that
retract
you are
it.
selling
but
snake
it's
oil
a
and that you are
story,
doing
right?
clinical trials that
Science
would
is a
never in a
story
million years
untold,
pass any kind
right?
of regulatory
Imagine
standards
you're reading a
to
book
sell
and you want to
snake
know the end
oil
of the
to
story, but
innocent people,
somebody
which
removed
will get
chapter
them
4
killed
and
so
chapter
that you
8
can
from your
enrich
story.
yourself
It's no
personally.
longer a story anymore. You've lost
like this woman's
characters.
primary product.
This is
he
the
is shit.
microbiome is a story. It's a story of discovery. It's a story of finding COVID in the stools.
It's a story of taking a dump
discovering
all
loss
over
of
science
bifidobacteria
and
in
then
severe
saying that
COVID
you're doing
patients.
that to
It's a
preserve
story of
democracy. to
noticing
save
that loss of
people's lives.
bifidobacteria happened to be in invasive cancers. It's a story of the messenger RNA killing the bifidobacteria.
It's a story
Therefore,
that
you
you're
have to
making
ask
up
questions.
because this
Is the
bifidobacteria
vaccine
thing doesn't
killing
have
the
any support
bifidobacteria? Are
either.
these people low in
And by the
bifidobacteria
way,
and
she
therefore
runs multiple
possibly
businesses
getting
based on this
But again,
idea.
my question was, why do you think your studies were retracted?
it?
I mean, what powerful interests were you threatening?
Well,
I mean, who didn't want your studies out there?
What powerful interest was I
People that are
threatening? Oh,
benefiting
I don't know. I was
from
just worried
the
about
price
maybe
of
being
the
exposed
stock
to
from-
somebody who's selling
from
snake oil to everybody
pharmaceutical
by actual
products
experts and
Treatments
regulators.
that aren't curing the diseases, basically.
Yes,
By the
they,
way,
they
just
don't
real
want
quick,
precision medicine.
this is one of the.
Oh, they
first
don't want
charts.
precision medicine, A. You mean they
Back in
don't want you to
2021.
look at their 16S
The blue
microbiome
lines,
data and
which
give
are
them a
down great big blue
prescription
bars,
for a
those are daily
bifidobacterium
new
like
cases.
shit
You'll
injection?
notice they
Like,
peaked
fuck off.
about
What are
January
you talking about,
2021,
ma'am?
just as we started the uptake of the COVID injection.
Cases, deaths,
Now-
and vaccination.
The-
Well, this is
the
an
pandemic
interesting
was
graph
definitely,
we've got here.
I'd call, say, petering out, right? You would think if the injection.
Look,
was
there's
that
more
effective,
COVID
that
deaths
wouldn't have
occurring
continued
because
in
people are still
pandemic
getting
COVID, right?
COVID even after they've been
That didn't
vaccinated.
happen.
Well, maybe
Now,
that
I
has
do remember,
something to
again,
do with the
contacting
fact
all these
that the virus
doctors, that
keeps
there were
evolving, and maybe it has something to do with the
vaccinologists
fact,
and
Dr. Thompson, that you've
immunologists
been
who were saying
discouraging
that the worst thing you can
vaccination
do in the
from
midst
day
of a
one, but there's a
pandemic
lot of people who
is
never
do
got
mass vaccination.
vaccinated. Rather than
It
having
was gonna
magical
drive
hybrid
variants.
immunity,
They
all
said we
these
had
people who were
Delta,
never
we had
vaccinated
Omicron.
and had
I
COVID,
don't, is that what
they're
happened?
taking
I
COVID
do
yet.
know probably the people that were
Why is
publishing
that
those studies or
happening?
those papers,
Maybe
probably
because we
passed.
don't
They were
develop
dismissed.
long-lasting immunity
No
against a
kooks.
virus like COVID
But
that can
again,
continually
does that chart look
evolve
like success
immune
of the
evasive
injection?
variants that can continue infecting
Dr.
us and getting
Delbridge,
around the
what do you
vaccines.
think
However,
of, what
people
happened in
look at the
terms
rate
of
of death among people who've been
the different
vaccinated
variants
versus
and
people who were not
I,
vaccinated.
I think that
That's
chart
when you
says it
see the
all.
difference, and that's
I'd
when you
just like to
actually see
point
that,
out
guess
that
what,
we
COVID
suffer
vaccines
from
work.
people
They
running this,
demonstrably
pandemic,
reduce
the
morbidity
response to
and
it, who really
mortality,
didn't
so sickness
understand
and death
basic
in people who get
aerosol
them and still get COVID
respiratory
compared to
diseases.
people who don't
They
get
always
vaccinated
go
and get
in
COVID.
cycles.
If you don't get vaccinated and you get COVID, you're more likely to die, you're more likely to have all sorts of
following
unpleasant
wave of
consequences of that infection.
gets less
Not
dangerous
guaranteed that
and
you won't have those
sometimes more
problems from
infectious, like
getting the
Omicron,
COVID
but
vaccine if
less
you
of
get
a
COVID,
problem.
but you're
And
much
one of
less
the big
likely to.
mistakes that was
And
made
that's
in
exactly
handling
what the
this
data
pandemic
shows.
is that, so I speak from the English data, which I know well. I suspect there's parallels.
And it's also
As we
not,
introduced
no,
lockdown,
there are some parallels in that
as
the
the first
UK
wave was
has idiots
disappearing,
like
so
you
they
who
gave
keep
credit
coming
for the
over
lockdown.
here to
They
spread this
introduced the
bullshit on
vaccine.
American soil.
When
Go
the
back to
second
your
wave
own
was
country
formed,
where
here's
we
the,
kicked you 250 years ago.
claim that they save millions of lives, which is completely utter nonsense because it's only
Liar.
that wave continued to go on, and it's all computer modeling that's been shown to be
You're a
completely,
liar.
utterly fallacious.
You're a complete
So
and
let me show
total
you a
liar
study
to
that has
say
not
that
been attacked
vaccines, COVID vaccines,
or
did not save
rebutted
millions
other
of
than
lives.
from me.
They demonstrably
And you
did.
talk about
It wasn't a
saving
computer model
millions of
that said
lives.
that.
You know, our
It
ranking
was
member here
actual data
a couple
about
hearings
people
ago,
who should have died
and I'll
from
enter this in
COVID,
the record.
but
This is
luckily did
the
not.
study from the Commonwealth Fund, claiming that in 2021, 2022, 3.2 million lives were saved. So I've got a series of three charts here. So the first chart shows actual deaths through 2019, compound annual growth rate. This is in the U.S., a little under 1%. So again, population is growing, we're aging, so number of deaths per year, but it's going, 2.4 up to about 2.85 in 2019. Let's show what actually happened. So here, actual deaths through 2024. So obviously in 2020, went from about 2.9 to 3.4. About 500,000 people died during COVID without a vaccine. Now, again, I would say if the vaccine was effective, particularly when new cases have pretty well plummeted by January of 2021, you'd see deaths go down in 2021. That's not what happened.
How many
We ended up
people
with
didn't get the
3.5 million
vaccine?
deaths. Came down
When
a
did
little
most
bit
people
more
get
in
access to the
2022,
vaccine
3.3.
also, Ron?
So again, well, where are all these?
I
Where's
had my
the
first
3.2 million lives saved?
vaccine, Johnson & Johnson OG clot shot in April.
You would have, in order to make this claim in this
People didn't
completely
get vaccinated in
BS paper.
2021.
I mean, again, I'm not a
So why
medical
do you think
researcher.
those
Man.
deaths
I'm not a
are
troll on
going
PubPedia. I'm
up?
just a a lowly accountant who can do simple math and produce some
Lowly
charts,
accountant who could do
you would have to
simple math.
assume we would have gone from 2.85 million deaths in 2019 and expected 5 million deaths in 2021 and 2022 with a vaccine available who's going to end the pandemic. And this paper still stands. A United States senator used this as proof.
You know, there have been multiple papers that have modeled how many lives were saved using different methods,
mRNA was actual mRNA,
many of which,
and not modified,
all of
not
which,
to be degraded
you
in
know,
the
they
body.
are able to justify.
Doesn't have a clue that biodistributes all over the body. Really doesn't understand the mechanism.
What the fuck does that have
It
to
could
do with
cause
anything?
cancer.
Biodistribution, okay, I don't
Make
understand
it
why this is a
3.2 million
mechanism
lives.
of
I mean,
turbo
obviously,
cancer.
you knuckleheads that
Why
are
does
talking
it-
about vaccine injuries, you don't understand the benefit. 3.2 million lives saved. How can you spread this disinformation?
It's not
This
disinformation.
information's from the
Every
other
single
side.
one of these studies estimate
don't
the
deny
different
the
number of
vaccine is
lives
considered
saved.
lives.
What is clear is that it's
I'll deny
numbered
that
in
you
the
say
millions.
3.2 million. There's no way. There's no way. And again, the point being here, this study, because it conforms to the narrative. I'm sure
Here we go.
Pfizer, Moderna love this study because they just got approved for another booster without any review of the vaccine, of the injection injuries.
That's
a
not
review,
true.
Even though Aaron Siri begged them to. Just look at it.
Aaron Siri is a vaccine injury litigator
Put
who
up
literally
Bears
stands
trial
to
on
make
21
millions if this ends up being, you know, we're actually not going to look at evidence to make court and civil litigation decisions. Aaron Siri
Yeah, that one.
would like to end the vaccine injury
this
compensation program so that he
shows-
can get
this shows
insanely, obscenely wealthy from it
The number of deaths
by
reported in
suing
VAERS
people over vaccine
closer to the
injuries.
vaccine
that don't
going
exist.
back to the start of VAERS in 1990. You can see through 2019, on average, about 280 deaths. I talked about
Okay,
that
he's
earlier.
talking about data that is
21
reported to the Vaccine
21,000
Adverse
deaths
Events
worldwide.
Reporting System, or VAERS.
Currently,
VAERS
the
is
number is
a
39,000,
completely
I think, 39.
passive surveillance system
And
that is
24%
completely
of those
self-reported.
deaths
So there's no way of verifying reports in VAERS.
Occur on either the day
There
of
are people who have
vaccination within 1 or
reported
2
that
days. Now,
vaccines
is that
have made
definitive
them grow a
proof?
penis out of their forehead.
Do some
on
of those
VAERS.
people die
So
within 2 days of
that's
something
the
else?
kind
than
of
the
vaccine
injection?
injury that's being
Probably, maybe.
reported. There's all kinds of fake death reports on
That would
VAERS
be
too.
something.
The
that
point
would
of VAERS
concern
is
me.
that if enough people report the
That'd
same
be
thing, that
something as a regulator who was
investigated
had the
using much
duty
more
to
rigorous methods
surveil
and more
safety and
granular
warn the
data that
American
can be
public,
verified.
then maybe the
Ron
American
Johnson is
public
using one of the
should be
oldest
warned.
vaccine anti-vaxxer tricks in the book
But the American public wasn't.
by claiming that VAERS data is more reliable than it is
And
to make
again,
a cherry-picked point
they
that
publish
isn't
these studies.
actually scientifically valid.
I mean, it's actually remarkable that Surge's fear was actually pulled down, but it was so. I mean, the data was completely fraudulent.
Okay, dude.
So
Yeah, we
I've
get
got-
it.
I
And
have
guess
so
what?
many
It was
questions for
retracted, which is
for you
exactly
guys.
what is supposed to happen. And that is the benefit also of post-publication peer review.
It's really.
Whether we like the conclusions or
I
not,
don't know where.
if a
where you
study
begin
is
when there's.
fraudulent, if scientific
Our side
misconduct
is-
has
yeah, I
occurred,
get
or even if
accused-
it's
by the
just
way,
wrong,
There's not been one
it's
thing.
so wrong it can't be corrected, then it is
Supreme Court has
retracted.
been proven to
That
be
is
wrong.
the normal procedure in journal
I'll challenge
publication.
Don't
Don't
anything
pay
I've been saying since
attention
I've been vilified,
to
ridiculed, and
the
It's not
political
one thing.
implications of a
there may be a
journal
couple minor
article
mistakes,
being
but the
retracted.
major points I've
You
made.
look at whether
all
or not
conspiracy theories that
should
I've
be
been
retracted
accused of.
based on what is
It's
in
all
there
true.
in terms of the evidence,
But yeah,
based on what the
we
journal article
get accused of
concludes,
misinformation.
and whether that comports
You know,
with what the
Uh,
evidence that has been
Dr.
offered to
Davis.
support
I
it
just wanted
shows.
to add in a couple of comments relative to what you
Here we
were
go.
alluding to. But the obfuscation of the real data was an absolute disgrace throughout. The fact that it got approved on being effective on a relative risk of 95%, when the absolute risk of 0.84 was ignored. And as a clinician,
Oh, they
I
love to
want
do
know
this
how
shit.
many
Like they
people
love
do
to
you
memorize
vaccinate
like
to
a
have
number
COVID?
here
It
and
was
there that
one
they
in,
can cherry
nearly
pick and
one in 100,
throw out there to
18.
confuse
I mean, it's just
everybody
not
that
worth it. The
0.084
second thing, when
versus
it comes to
whatever.
the side
Not
effects,
everybody's a
that
simple
they
accountant
basically
like
said,
Ron
well,
Johnson who
we
can just
don't
do
have
math.
side effects for the
This is
vaccine
intended
until at
to
least
make it look
14
like
days, 'cause that's
Gus
how long it
Gottlieb
takes
is
an antibody to
knows
go.
what he's
So all the
talking about
people who
here.
dropped
Write
down
down
dead
the real life
after 1 or
numbers.
2 days went down the
It
list
doesn't
as
actually mean anything.
unvaccinated because they were only
Side effects from the
No, I
vaccine go
mentioned this because
down.
I
That's
know
how long
it's
it
how
takes
they
an
rate
antibody to
the
go
trial.
down. That
It's
must
how
mean
they
the
rate-
antibody's
So,
bad.
with regards to the claims that there's
This doesn't make
there's no
any
link
sense
between the
whatsoever.
vaccines and cancer, which we hear repeatedly. like
Also, I've
vaccines
never
save
had a
millions of
vaccine
lives.
where I've had
There are a couple
14
of
days
things.
of
One, I
side
don't know
effects
any
after
other
receiving it.
cancer doctorics.
I have
my
had
colleagues,
side
once they
effects
rate
after
out,
receiving
who actually
vaccines,
ask
including
for
the
them.
Johnson &
Now, we were
Johnson
told at
vaccine.
medical
That
school,
one made me
you
feel
have to
pretty
ask for
shitty
the drugs and
for
the
about
vaccines if you're
24
dealing with a
hours.
disease you don't want to know.
It made me
But
feel
one of the
anxious
things
about a
that's
week
been
later when
pointed
the
out
news
to me,
came
who
out that
know about these things,
women under
is
the age of 50
CDC
are most
in
at risk of having
2024
a clutch
actually
shot.
published that was
But,
on
you
the
know,
mainstream
fortunately, I
media
managed
that
to
there was
get out of
18
that
million people
and vaccinated with
severely
the old
disabled by the
mRNA
vaccine in
experimental gene
America.
therapy ever
I was
since.
amazed to see it's been updated this year to over
No
30
turbo
million.
cancer
I
yet,
mean,
by
this
the
is
way.
it's continuing to rise, and this is a result of the vaccine. If you really want to know about the cancer and the vaccines, the CDC, I believe, I am informed by people who know about these things, they have separate registries. Surely they should be merged. Then we would have a much better
Well, first of all,
idea.
you're never going to find proof. When
Why
you
is
go
this
look
British
for
guy
proof,
talking
right?
about how
Absolutely.
how
That's the problem,
vaccine
is
data
you're
is
not gonna find
regulated and
studies.
managed in the United
Close their eyes. I
States?
mean, it was shown that,
Again,
and they still
worry
deny
about
it.
your own
Talk a
country.
little bit about, because I don't think we got an answer on this.
It's not
Why
like
is it
the
significant
UK
with-
doesn't have any problems at all. Have you
biopsies
ever
are
heard
seeing the
a
spike
physician
protein
from the
in tumors?
UK
Why
talk
shouldn't
about
they
the
be-
NHS?
Yes, to me, it's not obvious. I don't understand. I'm asking a legitimate question here. Why is that concerning? Why do you find that so odd that there's
Yes,
spike
I'd
protein
love
in
to hear the
tumors?
answer to
It's
this one.
completely unexpected. It shouldn't be there either from
Why is it
COVID infection
unexpected?
or vaccine. How does it get there?
Spike proteins in
You
the
know,
blood. That's where immune
It's a
cells live.
foreign protein. How
Immune
does it
cells go
end
into the
up
lymph
in a
nodes.
tumor
The
that's an
lymphatic system is
expanding
connected to the
mass
bloodstream.
where
You
the
get vaccinated
cells
with a COVID
have
vaccine, it
this
will make spike protein.
How does it
That
get
spike
there?
protein
What
will
is
be
it
in your blood.
doing there?
If you have cancer,
Why is it
that blood will then
that
be in your tumor.
it is 6
It's
years
not really
later
very surprising, Muffy.
and there's very little forensic evidence? People aren't looking
Forensic?
into the deceased to see what is happening.
Well,
Wait, could
I
part of
used
the
to work
answer
on
be because
hepatitis
the
C
modified
virus,
RNA is
and
still circulating in the body
one of the
6
things
years
it
later,
causes is cancer.
and when a tumor
So
starts,
people who would
it's
get a
still
liver
attaching themselves to
transplant, or
cells and
people who had
expressing spike
advanced
protein. That might be one
virus
plausible
infection with
explanation, right?
periodic
you know what
liver
boggles the
biopsies.
mind?
Those biopsies
You
are
talk
stored in
about
pathology
hepatitis,
archives.
okay? People
Those
get it,
patients
we've got
agreed
tests. You
to
can
let their
test
liver
for the
biopsy
hepatitis
do
antigens, the
the
antibodies. What
study that
happens
I
to
did to look at
6 years
hepatitis C
later?
virus.
There's no
Every
test
hospital that
for
does
spike
research has
protein,
all
for
kinds of
example.
things
Yeah, but
like
they
this.
didn't
So
want to know.
we could
Talk
actually
about,
go
because
back
this
and
is
look
true,
at people's
it was
tumors
very
and
rare
see
to
if they've
have
got all the
autopsies
spike
during COVID,
protein in
right? I
them.
know people who
Why haven't
had
we
loved ones
done it?
die
Why
who
hasn't
could not
El
get
Dury done that? He
autopsy.
is the,
Who can speak to
I don't
that?
know, he's
And
in
then
charge of
also
the
what coroners were seeing in
Precision
terms of
Oncology
the
Center,
long
and
white
he's
clots,
a highly respected
microclotting.
oncology
Dr.
researcher. So
I can speak to that.
maybe he could
because I
actually look
saw
at some of these
horrendous,
tumors.
Hyper-progression of disease. It's a term that's been applied to
Hyperprogression.
people with
This is like their
checkpoint
clinical
inhibitors.
term
It's
for
always-
turbo
There's
cancer.
a few of them. But we see this hyperprogression dramatically in patients who've had the boosters. And I've seen it in friends of mine.
It's like
and
in
it's
Star
really
Wars when they go
disturbing.
into
They don't even
hyperspeed.
respond to classical
All the stars
therapy.
turn into
And I
line.
tried very, very hard
Hyperprogression,
to
except with
get
tumors.
the tissue checked for spike protein. That no coroner would do it, and we went everywhere. No coroner.
Why would a coroner
do
be
it. So
checking
it was clearly
like
told
a
from the
dead
top down.
body for
Now, while
spike
we're talking
protein?
about a test,
Why don't you ask a
it was very
pathologist if
easy
they
to
would look
measure
at that?
spike protein in the blood. And I have been campaigning is that, you know, the damage this continuous spike production does is so dangerous. It's going to keep going on.
What does it
And
do?
the cancer's going to keep
I don't
getting
understand
worse
actually
and
what,
worse. We
how
need
is
to
the
be able
spike
to measure
protein
the spike
causing
protein.
damage? I
Simple
don't,
test
I
which
truly
we did
don't
in the USA is
understand
not
this.
needed.
Nobody's been able to
And then you
explain
can
to me
try some very
why it's
simple
so
things which we
toxic.
know help dissolve
It just like
the
causes
spike
cancer.
protein in the body, which natural processes don't do. And several of these are available.
It
and
helps
they're quite
dissolve
cheap.
the spike
Things like
protein.
nattokinase, low-dose naltrexone,
God,
and
nattokinase.
ivermectin,
Okay.
etc. Why aren't these studies being done and funded? Because they're so simple to do, and they could save an awful lot of morbidity. Because certainly in individual anecdotal cases, says this works. Giving these things will bring the
Yeah,
spike
what he's
protein
saying
down
is that if you
consistently.
take this
So I think
enzyme
it
that is
should actually
derived
be
from
a
fermented
national
soybeans
program
that look like
to
basically
check
soybeans and snot that they serve in
Not to-
Japan.
not to pick
I've
on
tried
you,
it.
Why don't we
It
conduct?
doesn't
this
really
program?
taste that bad, but like the texture is off-putting to me. I feel like
Well,
it's one of those
I'll
things you
tell
gotta
you,
grow
I
up
had
with.
an opportunity to talk to our NCI
But it's
director,
totally not true
Dr.
that
Tony
nattokinase,
Matai,
which
this
refers
past
to a
week, knowing,
enzyme that
I'll be
adds
coming to this
a
hearing, and he
phosphate group
suggested
to another protein.
we
That's
both
what
support
kinase
continued
do. It's
surveillance.
part of the
We
signal
both support
transduction cascade
continued research in this.
or
He
protein
suggested
signaling,
that
which
the NCI has an
Elviri
ongoing
at least should know
Connect
about, because
trial
that's
with
how his beloved
200,000
tumor
Americans
suppressors
who have
partially work.
not had cancer
Any
when they
hoodle,
enter,
there
and it's
are many
looking at
mechanisms, natural
causes of
mechanisms,
cancer and
Brady
cancer prevention.
proteins,
We have lots of
proteasome,
different
other
cohorts. We have
proteolytic
proposed different
enzymes, nattokinase is
potential
one of
causes
them.
of cancer.
We don't know
and
what
this could
nattokinase
be
does,
one.
but there's
They're
no reason why
collecting
the
blood,
spike
they're
protein that's made by
collecting tumor.
mRNA vaccine is
So
any different than the
he is
spike
very
protein made by the
supportive
virus.
of studying
And
this
there's
in
no
an
reason
ongoing
why it can't
cohort
be
of
degraded by the
200
proteasome or
Americans
any
where
of
they
these
know
proteolytic
everything about
protein
the patient's
degradation.
history. They're collecting blood. I don't know what they're probably collecting other things. And then if they get cancer, they're collecting the cancer. So there is a mechanism that we
So
talked
Dr.
about
Grayla is
when we could
describing
further study this.
a perspective
Dr.
study
Moser, I know I wanted
that
to ask
actually
you,
is
because
addressing this.
You did your study.
Cause other bad
uh,
problems.
Claimed 3 million excess deaths. I mean, how did you come up with your numbers? And again, try and keep it pretty high level, and so we can
No, she's
understand this
just
is
a
pretty brief.
highly respected
as
cancer
loud as possible.
researcher. Oh, no, she's not. Sorry.
I really can barely hear you. You gotta
Dr.
get-
Graylo.
No, in our study.
She's just
we
a random Dutch
assessed
unemployed woman who
excess
can't figure out how to
mortality
work
as
her
the deviation
microphone.
between the reported number of deaths in a country during a certain week or month in 2020 until 2020, and the expected number of deaths in a country for that period under normal circumstances. For the baseline of expected deaths, historical death data was used in a country 2015 until 2019, and all-cause mortality reports were abstracted for countries of the Western world, our world in database, their reported number of deaths from the human mortality database and the world mortality data set.
And again, all you did is publish your results.
Yeah.
And so we're not saying anything caused, it's just this is something that ought to be looked into. And rather than looking into it, they attacked you, and you end up having to resign. And
No, see, they actually
Right,
attacked
I
it
guess.
because
Dr. Adil,
they
Adil,
did
you
the
look
analysis
like you wanted to
wrong,
say
and then
something.
they
I want to
tried
make
to
a couple of
effectively
points
defend that and not
and
correct it.
maybe discuss this with Dr. Graylo about a population signal versus a risk of developing cancer or other diseases. So we know in medicine that everybody has different risks. And one of the questions that I think is important to answer is, what is a specific patient's risk of side effects from the COVID vaccine? And what is the risk of
Okay,
cancer?
here's another thing that they're
however
trying to do. They're
infinitesimally
trying to make it
it-
so
it
that we're
would
not
be.
making population
know,
level recommendations, and
numbers
we're
really
actually
matter.
making individual recommendations.
Many
for every
decades
single
ago,
vaccine. This is
my
a
daughter
tactic to
was
try to
born,
reduce vaccine
and she had
access by making
hypoxic
everybody
brain
go talk to
injury
a
during
doctor
her birth.
before they
And
administer
nobody
any
ever told
vaccines or get
me
any vaccines
about
administered.
what those risks were. Is it 1 in 100,
This is not
1 in
about
1,000,
informing
1 in
people about the risks
10,000?
because people are currently
didn't know,
informed
and I'm
about
a
that when they go to get a vaccine. There's
And
actually
I
a
have to
list,
live with
a
those
piece of paper that you
consequences
get and
for
sign
the
when you
rest
get a
of my life.
vaccine that says these are the
If
risks.
I
It's
knew
part of
there was a
providing informed
chance of
consent
this
because
that
in the
could have
US, we
been
do not
prevented by a
vaccinate people
C-section,
forcibly.
I would have
Everybody who
had
gets
that
a
done, and my
vaccine,
daughter
whether they
could
do
be
so based on a recommendation or
a
not,
beautiful person
will
functioning in
have to provide
society.
informed
And
consent
so
to get
these
that vaccine.
things are really
He's
important. For
acting
the
like this
people
doesn't
who are
exist and
harmed,
that everybody
what are
needs
their
to
risks?
assess
We
their
know
individual
people
risk
have
for
very
getting a
different
vaccine,
risks of
which is
developing
impossible
cancer.
to do
It's 6
and
years
completely
later.
unnecessary.
The things need
And
to be
again, it is
nuanced.
only
What is the
designed to
relationship
make
with
it
the number
more
of
difficult for
shots
people to
as
access
far as
vaccination.
the
It is
effects
ultimately designed
of the
to reduce
vaccine?
overall
We
vaccination
need-
in the
But again,
population,
we're not
making
getting
us
those studies because
susceptible
the people
to
who
disease epidemics.
just pretty simple. So here's
And
some
in the case of the
plausible
HPV
mechanisms
vaccine,
of how the spike
cancer.
protein could cause cancer. They're destroying your career. So it doesn't take a
Nobody's
dictator,
destroying this
many
guy's
people to have
career. How many millions of dollars in grants,
City
federal
Square
grants, does
before,
Wapiti Deary still
like,
have?
people stop behaving.
I
right?
might
And
look
the
that
same
up on
thing, the
NIH
doctor's been
Reporter
attacked,
when
their
I'm done with
licenses
this.
were threatened, they were fired, they were sued. That's why you didn't have very many people doctors treating with ivermectin, did you, Dr. Hazen? I mean, how many doctors do you know whose careers were destroyed because they had the courage and compassion to try and treat patients with, and we showed, I mean, ivermectin was up there in terms of effectiveness.
No, it's not. And study after study shows that it's not. It shows that it is no benefit whatsoever for treating
So
COVID-19.
it's kind of hard to blame him, isn't it?
Very few doctors during the pandemic had the courage to treat, and I think partly because
wrong.
yes, doctors
Plenty
are
of
afraid of losing
grifters
their
had the
licenses.
courage to treat and start new
and-
telemedicine
and-
businesses,
They often
probably
have
just
$200,000,
like you did, Dr.
$300,000 worth of
Hazen.
debt.
Yeah, and then you're
They
looking
had
at
the courage to take lots and
went through
lots
all
of
this,
money
they wanna
from
continue
people
practice
to
medicine
prescribe
because
them
they
a
wanna
generic drug
save
that
people's
costs
lives, like they
pennies.
saved my daughter's life with
It doesn't work for
transfusion-related
COVID.
errors.
And if
So
you have a
I
worm
understand
or a
it,
parasitic
but it just shows you how
infestation,
effective
ivermectin's
the
great.
attacks are. It doesn't take, they don't have to make an example of too many people like Dr. Eldiri or you or Dr. Mostert or Dr. Malhotra, right? It doesn't take many.
Here's the problem. In order to
Each
reach
and
a
every
cure,
one of those
we need to
people
have
is making a
bravery
fortune
and
on the
courage to
side
practice
from
medicine.
being so
And
bravely
if we
dissenting,
don't
from
have
having the
courage,
courage
we
to
can't
treat
treat.
people
You
with
know, I
drugs that
stood on the
don't
front
work
line
against
of
a deadly
COVID,
disease.
unaware. Really, at the beginning, I was kind of scared
These
of the
people are
virus.
putting people
And
at
then I
legal
treated
risk
my first patient, my second
so
patient,
that they
my
can
third
make money,
patient, my
so that they
patient
can
number
have
1,000,
better
2,000,
positions
and I'm
within
still
this
standing.
administration so that they can
And I
suck
learned
up to the
something.
fascists
I learned the
who are
microbiome.
trying to
But
kill
I realized
Americans,
that
I
I
should
was
add, so that they
trained
can
to be
steal
in this
our money
position. You know,
and
I was
make us
trained
all
as
less
a
healthy,
physician
make us
to
all less
cross those
capable of
roadblocks, to have
resisting this
courage.
and
Because
insisting
I
that
work
America
with
is
the
a
FDA
democracy
on multiple.
governed by
I've
the
worked
people.
with the FDA on
These
multiple
people are
protocols
saying
for
they've
pharmaceutical
been so
companies. So I've
bullied by the
developed that courage
democratic
to say,
process,
no, this
they're
is a
unable
serious
to
adverse
impose
event. It
their
needs to
snake
be
oil
reported
on
to the
all of the
FDA,
rest of us.
and that drugs needs to be shut down. But not every doctor has that training, unfortunately. And it, by the way, for me to do those protocols of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, which, you know,
It costs
we
hundreds
pay,
of
I pay,
thousands of
you
dollars
know, and
to prescribe people
I
generic
asked
drugs.
myself, what, you know, that study of the vaccine pre and post that showed messenger RNA killed the microbiome, that was 2 Lamborghini Countach, right? Or or whatever. But the fact is, I spent.
I love how she's
today,
measuring the cost
I
of
asked
clinical
myself,
trials
what if
in
I didn't spend?
Lamborghinis.
Were we supposed to get a
How many
vaccine every 3 months
Murcielagos
the
is
rest
it?
of our lives?
And
Are we a bunch
actually-
of sheep that are just going, you know,
It's a
down the
Lamborghini.
road and listening to pharma, and nobody's
not worth it.
questioning the data, nobody's questioning, you know, what we're supposed to do, how to defend ourselves. I discovered the microbiome during the pandemic. It was the light at the end of the tunnel.
I
was
discovered the
hope.
microbiome
And
at the end of the
without hope in
pandemic.
medicine, we have no medicine.
So part of
How
the
many
problem
Murcielagos
I've
did it
seen
cost
over
you?
the last few decades here in America, and I think in England it's been longer with the national health care, but we used to have independent doctors. And, you know, the doctor has the primary responsibility of the patient, and they used to sit at the top of the treatment pyramid and practice medicine. By the way, I really did learn the meaning of the word practice medicine with my daughter with transposition. You know, she had an arterial, she had a atrial switch versus arterial switch because they hadn't practiced medicine enough to do it the other way. But anyway, so doctors need to practice medicine, but right now they're being crushed at the bottom of the pyramid because now they're all hired hands. The hospitals can fire them, they can sue them. They practice protocols handed down, not just.
I'm pretty sure that doctors have always been able to be fired and sued, especially for things like medical malpractice, like prescribing patients drugs that are demonstrably ineffective for treating a lethal disease, like COVID-19, for
And
example.
the nurses sure didn't want to use it, but man, was it profitable for the hospitals, for the drug companies.
How
Again, that's
profitable
what
is
the
it for
American
Sabine
public has to
Hazan?
understand is the
How profitable
corruption
is it for Asim Malhotra?
of medicine,
How profitable is
medical
it for the Reform
education,
UK Party?
of
How
science,
profitable is it
of
for
medical, it's been corrupted.
everybody within the Make America Healthy
awful.
Again movement?
It's got to be fixed. But the only way we fix it is if we own up to it and we admit it.
Indeed.
That's really what this hearing's about.
So let's have
is
some
let's
admissions,
come to
guys.
terms with how broken this system
How
is.
much money are you making
and
off
how
of
you're
all of
only going to
this?
get the studies that's going to confirm big pharma and their patentable drugs that have
How
driven
many
up the cost of healthcare. We're not
jobs
curing diseases,
does
we're
anyone
treating it
lost?
at a very
What is
high
your
profit
financial
level. I come from the
situation?
private sector.
Even
When
good
I
old
first ran in
Flavia, who
2010,
has no
the campaign
affiliation
guy said,
whatsoever, and I
"Sign up."
guess
said,
is just
I'll defend big pharma.
enjoying, you know, European socialism.
You know, we need medical research.
What's
We
she
need
doing on
drug
the
companies
side?
to do this.
I bet she's got a
But
side
man,
hustle.
we need first and foremost, integrity restored to science, because it
The
doesn't
McCullough
exist.
Institute,
I
maybe?
don't think it exists anymore.
And by the way,
Or
that's the
selling
future. The future
nattokinase
is
and
actually
ivermectin
robots
as part of
replacing
some sort of
doctors. So we've
protocol
lost
to rid your
humanity.
body of
We've lost
spike
the ability
protein that
to
you're
hold the hand of a patient. Think of what happened
causing
during COVID.
turbo
We were
cancer
putting
from and
gloves on
shedding
people's
to
hands
everybody.
because we were afraid, doctors and nurses
Robots
were
are
afraid of touching these
replacing the
patients because
doctors. We've
we
lost our
instill
humanity.
because fear sells products.
Indeed,
I
it sure
talked to a
does.
senior
Just like the
surgeon
fear that you're
over
selling
Dollar
right
G.
now about vaccines that
He'd
are
be scared
proven
to
to
death
work and not
trying to go to
cause
surgery
turbo
now.
cancer.
Because young surgeons, they don't touch patients anymore. They use robotics and stuff and just don't, they haven't got the just depth of skill of feeling.
You know, actually,
feel
I
the
think it's
infected
better to
food.
have a surgeon
It's scary
operating a
stuff.
precision
We need to-
robot
You know,
that is
here's
capable
what
of
else is
doing
scary.
things that human hands physically are not, because it's
Felder, you
the
understand
surgeon
this,
who's
to
doing
being a
it.
cancer patient.
It's called technology and
Having
innovation,
lost
Ron.
confidence, knowing how they sabotage early treatment with
But then
treatment
again,
drugs.
we
There
want to
was
cut
a
all of that because
observational
basic
study,
research, waste of funding, and bad.
Actually, Dr. Harvey Risch
Enabling all these vaccines.
Peter McCullough. And it's apparently 200 cancer patients treated with ivermectin and mebendazole. So I've got some oncologists here. I mean, is that something you're willing to take a look at? Because trust me, I know people have cancer, and they are looking for anything other than the poison that chemotherapy is.
Scott Adams, the
You know,
Dilbert
might extend
guy,
your life a
like
little
took
bit.
ivermectin and
And I know we're
mebendazole or whatever it
making
is
progress and stuff, but
for
man,
his
that's a nasty
prostate
cure.
cancer. He
People are
died several
begging
months ago in
for-
excruciating
Again,
pain,
true science, take a look at
publicly
this. Are
stating
some of
that
these
he
things-
regretted
and this
listening to the
looks pretty
people who
effective.
suggested that
I'll
he
go to
take
the
ivermectin.
oncologist here, Dr. Dalgish.
It
is
doesn't
that something you
work
think
to
has
treat
promise, or
cancer.
Are there other, peptides?
These
I mean, I've
people
heard all
who are
kinds of
telling
stuff.
people to
Maybe
take
Dr. Elaine
ivermectin
Buzinski
or any other
tried to
unproven
destroy him, but he's still
drug to
practicing
treat
down in,
cancer
in
are
Texas.
literally killing
Just
people
talk
who have
about other
otherwise
treatments for
treatable
cancer.
cancers.
Well, one of the things
It's
about
reprehensible.
cancer is that what you can use is very limited to what Big Pharma are going to choose and do.
That is
And we
total
know that
and
it's not
complete
done for
bullshit.
the benefit of the patients. It's done for the benefit of the markets that they create. And I've heard 3 people from Big Pharma all tell me they're not interested in cures, they're interested in the markets. And that brings us to the attention of what the patients actually want. And the patients want sort of cheap, non-toxic drugs that might work. And the most amazing thing is that if you look and scratch the surface, we have an enormous number of them that are really quite effective. And I make no bones about it. I'm very interested in low-dose naltrexone, which seems to enhance people with cancer to any other chemotherapy, immunotherapy, etc. But there are many, many others out there, artesunate, etc., that have been shown to have interesting anti-cancer activity.
Okay.
So they're being repurposed.
He's
So of
talking
course,
about
the
drug
2 big
repurposing
ones
experiments
are
that are very
ivermectin,
early stages
and,
that
but people
occur
forget this.
in cell culture in an experimental system, something that is not necessarily relevant to actually human people
because it
and
was
human
the
patients.
most effective.
What happens with a lot of these,
by
and I do a
far,
lot of
with
drug
few-
repurposing
few,
work, we
competitors,
tested this,
but it was
for
so
example,
good.
with
And
drug
in 2 extreme
repurposing
cases
hit that we
myself,
got in
I authorized it to
2017
be
for
used.
treating
People
Ebola.
did not want to go
Now,
into hospital.
this
even though
drug,
they were
which was a
because they were convinced they were
corticosteroid,
going to die if they went in, and I think they
did
were
in
probably
some
right. But
in
within
our mouse
24
model,
hours,
it did
they're
reduce
both
the
much,
time,
much better. And then
or
Paul Corey,
it
of
did
course,
increase
has
the
written a
time,
beautiful book with
delay
all
the
of them
onset
ivermectin.
of severe
Now, it
clinical
looks
symptoms
like some of
and
these
delayed
people had
the
cancer,
onset of
and
death.
that there is a
The
real
animals
role
still
for
died.
looking
Like,
at
so
these
it was a drug
anti-parasite
repurposing
things.
hit that
But
was
do they have a
promising, but
I
then
mean,
when
I'll
we
go,
tested
Doctor,
it out,
do these
it
therapies
failed
have a
testing,
chance?
and so we
I mean,
don't
with big
keep
pharma
working
again
on that.
demanding
And that
random
is the
controlled
fact
trials,
of all these drug
you get the
repurposing
observational
studies.
stuff.
It's not
where
because
only
Big Pharma doesn't
expensive
want people to
anti
repurpose
drugs.
their
I
drugs.
stay
They
open
would love it if
minded.
people
I mean,
repurposed
just
their drugs
up
because
the
that would mean they
road
could get a
from
new
here,
patent
Johns
on some of
Hopkins,
them
one
or an
my
extension on their
colleagues has
patent
been
rights.
looking at mebendazole.
The fact is,
for
most repurposed drugs don't actually work once
these
they go into
agents
more
do
advanced testing.
uh,
So you have to have
affect the
really,
immune
really
system,
well-designed screens, and you have
we
to have
learn
really
about them
well-designed
and
tests to look at
study
their
them
efficacy
more.
so that you can
I mean, we'll
filter
make this
the
available
gems
to the
from,
people who
you
just
know,
want to try
all the
something
cubic
different. I mean,
zirconium.
again, people are having, I know they can't get these kind of treatments. They have to go to just a very few doctors who are willing to do it. I mean, cancer centers won't do it. Is that largely true? I mean, Dr.
That's
Gale,
not true
really
because you
thinking,
can go to any one of these quacks
what
and get
can
them to
we do?
prescribe
I mean, is this
ivermectin
something
to you,
that
and there are
your society
any
is looking
number
at? I
of
mean, do they
different
look at
you know,
cheap
wellness
generic drugs that don't have
organizations,
the type of
membership
toxicity that some of these
services,
chemotherapists-
telemedicine services that
I
will
think
do
this
this for
speaks to
a
the role of
lot
the
more
need
money
to
than
sustain
ivermectin actually costs
federal
for something
funding.
that doesn't
I
work.
agree. Industry is not going to do those trials. They don't have a vested interest
Correct.
in it. These are cheap drugs. These are the kinds of trials that our government
Mm-hmm.
should
By the
fund.
way, I completely agree as long as that funding isn't corrupted in some way, shape, or form, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I
So
will
this is
tell
the
you
other thing.
that
The
at
government would
last
love
year's
to fund your
pre-annual
study,
meeting,
except, big
we
pharma is
had
still
very
corrupt.
preliminary data in a
Democrats,
subset
actually.
of breast cancer,
Um,
looking at an immune
but,
checkpoint
you know, that's the
inhibitor
excuse.
with
We'd love to do this
ivermectin
study, except
added.
we can't
It
because,
showed there were some
corrupt big
responses.
pharma.
It did not prove the responses were any
Instead, we
higher
have to do
than
this other study
immunotherapy
that's
alone.
bullshit
But
because
they proved a safe
somehow is bad for
dose
big
in combination, and that trial, which
benefits
is
a different
federally
corrupt
funded,
party.
will continue to try to see if it was more than the immunotherapy
I'll
alone
just tell you, because
would cost.
patients are just begging for it. They really are. They just,
Yeah, Ron, I
lot
get
of
that.
people
But
are
like
just,
the
I'm not
thing
gonna
is, this
take
is
it.
why we do clinical
Yeah,
trials, to
it's-
see whether something works
You
and it's safe
started
or
the
not
Right
before
to
we
Try Act, and that's
before we
exactly
approve
why the
it
Right to
to be
Try
given
Act
to
was
patients who have
designed
things
for.
like cancer
Unfortunately,
that
the
will
Right
kill
to
them.
Try Act is very difficult to allow terminal patients to have access to anything. Personally, a person that's dying should have access to anything they want. My
By the
only
way,
concern,
the reason it's not as effective is because we had to water it down so the big pharma wouldn't tank it.
What?
That's the truth. We had to back it way down, make it pretty exclusive. So the primary benefit of Right to Try is the title.
So what you're saying
yes,
is
but
that you
the
watered
paperwork to get
down
that Right
like,
to trial approved for a
you know,
patient
blockbuster
is
clinical
very
trial
difficult
results
for
because
a practitioner
big
to
pharma
do.
made you. So you,
You
Ron
know,
Johnson, senator
the
from
other thing that I
Wisconsin,
wanted to say
are
with
saying
these
that
patients
we,
is,
meaning you
you
and
know,
all of these
they have
grifters,
the right,
got
but
together
my
and
concern with
manipulated
hearing
the
about
data about
ivermectin and
ivermectin so that big
fenbendazole on
pharma
social
wouldn't be
media and not
worried about it.
having the right research
Sounds like you're
backing
admitting
it
to
up
scientific
is
misconduct
patients
to
that
me,
have an
although
early
I do know
cancer
that you weren't involved
tend to
in any
want to go the route of
science
ivermectin, fenbendazole, and could have just had a surgery to resect that stage 1 cancer, but now they've delayed the cancer and it's stage 4. So I think this is why we need to do good research, and this is why we cannot stop the publications again of research. And I want to encourage
Literally
all
nobody has
these
stopped
physicians that are out
publications.
there using ivermectin
Again,
and
these people
mebendazole
cannot get their
to
papers published or they have them
your data
retracted
so that
because they are
we,
either
the physicians
fraudulent
that are
or
doing clinical
fundamentally
trials, can
incorrect.
criticize it. It doesn't have to be retracted. It could stay there so someone else
It
can
does
come
need to
in
be
and say,
retracted because
you
it's
know what,
wrong.
I proved that person wrong and it didn't work.
I mean, don't you think doctors themselves, yeah, you don't want snake oil salesmen out there. You don't want.
Why are you talking to these people?
But you don't want this happening either. And again, I think people admit that pub peer, the way it's initially run was probably the right thing to do.
Also,
It
pub
was
peer is,
valid, but then something
correct
took
me
it
if I'm
over.
wrong, but
And
it's
it,
kind of
now
freedom
the
of
nickname is
speech
pub
to
smear.
be able to express your
So
opinion
again, we're trying to
about
highlight
scientific
that, to maybe
papers
stop
that are
that
literally
abuse.
supposed to undergo
There's got to
continued
be,
peer
I mean, from my
review by
standpoint,
the
it's like
entire community.
publish the papers and, you know, have your
What's
own
the point of
reputation
publishing?
be the thing that really guides you in terms of not publishing junk. And if you publish junk, I mean, pretty soon I mean, like real junk, not being
I mean,
tormented.
these guys
tormented
think
with
that
a
just,
bunch
you
of
know, getting
spelling
published should
mistakes and
shield
stuff.
you from any
The medical
criticism
community
forever.
is very
I'd like to
critical
ask them to
of
please
papers
shut
to
the fuck
begin
up
with.
about
And
all
if
of
a
our
paper
science and
passes
cell
peer
papers on the
review,
origins of
it needs to stay.
COVID-19.
But talk about peer review, because we've
These
talked about
underwent
this.
months
Yes.
of
That's
peer
not
review as
exactly
well. And we've
peer
corrected
either, is it?
minor errors that we found
Because you
in
don't
these
have any
papers.
control who those peers are, and you'll get
Didn't
sometimes
change
get
the
peers
conclusion.
that have a
There was never
different
any need
patent or
for an
different drug, and they
investigation
want to
because guess
destroy
what?
your
Our
research.
papers have been scrutinized
Well,
on
that's part of
pub
a
peer
problem.
There's
and
a
nobody's
problem
found
in
any
that
kind of
area as
issues
well,
like
but I
this.
mean, for the majority of
Might have
peer
something to do
reviewers, I'll
with
give
the
you an
fact
example. The
our
paper
work
that
is
was in
actually
gut
quality. We
pathogen
spend a
that
lot
was
of time
retracted, the
thinking about
landmark
the
paper
integrity
finding
of our
COVID in stools,
scientific work
the
and our own
journal is now
scientific
asking me to
professional
peer review
conduct.
another paper because
Unlike
I'm
this
considered
grifter.
the expert in the microbiome space. I find it
An
funny that
expert
they
in the microbiome
retracted a
space who
landmark
completely made up
paper
a
on
disease
COVID
that
and
didn't
now are
previously
asking me
exist.
to peer review a
And
paper
now
on
I'm selling the
COVID.
cure
Just point
for
out
it.
the adjective I use, Dr. Mahaltra.
Yeah, I just want to what really important point here is that, you know, when it comes to randomized controlled trials, when, you know, doctors are making decisions on non-transparent data, the peer reviewers of those trials don't have access to the raw data. So they're making decisions on data that isn't transparent. And so we have to go further upstream, Senator Johnson. In my view, with everything that's happened over the last few decades, we see the excessive use of medications. We have estimates, the third most common cause of death globally after heart disease and cancer, according to one senior Cochrane reviewer, is prescribed medications because of avoidable side effects. I mean, that is extraordinary. And that can be corrected if in the future we say enough is enough. Drug companies they can develop drugs, but they can no longer test their own products, and we just rely on their results. That has to change.
That has never been the case, okay?
Medical knowledge will still be under
When a
commercial
pharmaceutical company conducts a phase 3 clinical trial in support of a biologics license application, which is the application for FDA approval, they design every step of that study with the FDA to make sure that they are spending millions and millions of dollars on this giant trial.
I think we need to
Generate
just
data that the
reiterate
FDA will find
great
useful
difficulty
when
with
evaluating
censorship
whether or
we've
not that approval
experienced.
should be issued or
I mean,
not.
right at the beginning, my
We
colleague
do not just
and I
blindly
noted
trust
that the
the
sequence of
vaccine
the virus
manufacturers, and we
clearly
definitely should not
had,
blindly trust a
positive
Steve Malhotra,
inserts
who,
into it,
again,
and
is
this
trying
meant
to
that
make
it came
MAGA
from the
happen for
laboratory.
the
There could be no other
Disney
explanation.
wants to be the
And
British
we submitted
RFK
it to the
Jr.
journals, and they all rejected it with
This guy might
exactly
be
the
ahead of
same
him in
thing.
line,
We have
however.
no problem with the science. It is not
I
in
think
the
he's
public interest.
considerably worse
How
on
come
camera
Nature
than
Science,
Goldie,
Cell, Virology, and
unfortunately.
the Lancet
And I would guess
all
that
used
Angus
the same
Dalglish
words? It was like they were
does
expecting
not
it
have
to
perfect
be bad. My
mitochondrial or
university
metabolic
told me
health
we were
like
not
Asim
allowed
does.
to research this.
To get to the root
origin of the
causes of that
virus.
problem.
This is a suppression of something that I thought it was probably going into Stalin's communism or something. We were no longer allowed to discuss the truth, to discuss science, even if it
Stalin's
was flawed.
communism. Okay,
It
so
was completely verboten. I've
you're
never thought I would
suggesting
ever come to see
then
that,
that
but it has not stopped.
dissident
It has not stopped.
scientists
It
like
still
him were at
continues.
risk
You
of
can't get
being
papers
accused of
published
being a
on things
spy
they
and
do not want.
executed,
They come
sent
back,
to a
and with the
gulag,
peer review, they
tortured to death in
nitpick
prison, or
absolutely
any of
to
the
the
things
point
that
where,
happened to
what's the
Nikolai
point? They
Vavilov
clearly
and
don't
the
want
other
good data being
geneticists
published.
who
So
were
we must
targeted
not
by
forget
Trophy
that
Lysenko
here
during
we've had
Stalin's
people who've
attacks
lost
on
their
science.
jobs.
That's
being
what Stalin
totally
did to
targeted.
scientists who
And
disagreed
the
with
big
him.
thing is why.
That is not what's happening
And I
to
must
you,
say,
buddy.
when you
You're
get into
testifying in front of the
dystopian
U.S.
like this,
Senate,
you have to say,
along with
Q-bonus.
all of your
You know,
stakeholder
who is
buddies
benefiting?
who have
And
done
I
just
think
fine
the insight I
despite
can give
being
you from our
criticized
investigations,
sometimes
what
on
we've
Twitter.
seen in talking to folks,
Yeah.
is a very major goal causing this is you cannot create vaccine hesitancy. So anything that, any truth, any
Well, we don't have to worry about that because you guys are doing a
that just
fantastic
could
job.
cause vaccine hesitancy.
In fact, you're not just causing vaccine
rely on that.
hesitancy, you're
So, no, I
causing
mean,
vaccine
okay,
refusal
we maybe should have warned the public.
because you're fear-mongering
But
about fake
we
risks
warned the
of
public,
turbo
that would've created
cancer,
vaccine hesitancy. And again,
myocarditis, clot
Because
shots,
we
blah,
saved
blah, blah,
3.2
blah,
million
blah.
lives.
I'm very disappointed
We
they
certainly
didn't have a
can't
5G wireless.
deny people that
expert here.
injection. because
Bill Gates
that's,
microchip
I mean,
expert.
I think that is driving a lot of this. And of course, why don't you want to create a vaccine hesitancy? Because you don't put billions of dollars in the big pharma's pockets because they have no liability for these vaccines. And it's just a big money-making center. So yeah,
No, we'd rather make
they
that
got the
money.
and then
We'd
they
rather make
buy
that
the
money
ads,
selling
they
bifidobacterium or
invest
whatever.
in medical journals, medical associations, medical colleges. That's the grift that's going on here.
Okay, well, maybe if the
My
government
honest
paid for
answer
some
to
of
that
those
is it is
places,
time
then
to
they wouldn't have to
withdraw
take
the
money from the
1986
pharmaceutical
Vaccine
companies to make
Identity
ends meet.
But no, I agree.
You know, the pharmaceutical companies
I
do
agree.
make products that, treat
Dr. O'Leary.
cancer, so it makes sense that the American
well,
Society
I've
of
got a few
Clinical
things I want to get off
Oncologists,
my
like,
chest.
do work
Sure.
with pharmaceutical
Yeah.
companies since
Yes.
they're selling the
So
treatments that they're literally
In
soaking their patients' blood
science,
with.
we need to be able to think creatively and talk with each other and discuss things in a civilized manner.
Civilized.
With mutual respect and not being dismissed.
See, when you lie
as
though with you,
irrelevant.
I don't
or-
respect
or
that. So I don't
whatever.
really feel like I need to be
And
that
that's
cool
a
with
big
your lying
problem
ass.
these days. I think some of the issues we're talking about also have to do with informed consent.
Which
A
again,
lot of things, I
exists.
don't believe we have informed consent.
We
with
sure
COVID
do,
and learning
Wafik, and you
vaccines.
know that that's
I do want to
true.
clarify, the comment was made that we've been doing mRNA research for decades. It should be clear to everyone the pseudouridine modified mRNAs were used for the first time in the population in the COVID pandemic. Never before. First time ever.
Untrue. Multiple clinical trials have been done over the last
there
10
needs
years
to be
using
more
pseudouridine
oversight of these
containing
things
mRNA
and
vaccines
more,
for everything from
modern
SARS-1 and MERS
regulations of
coronavirus,
what's
the flu,
allowable as contaminants,
cytomegalovirus,
with the
RSV,
nanoparticles.
seasonal
The
flu,
comment
bird
was
flu,
made
cancer. Lots and
elsewhere
lots
about
of
how fast these
experimental
tumors
trials
grow
have been done with
after the
mRNA
COVID,
vaccines that contain
vaccines.
pseudouridine. So
And
we
I
will
will
talk
say
about
that we've known for a number of years, one of my colleagues, Dr. Razel Kurzrock, one of the premier clinical trialists in the world, noticed that people who get cancer immunotherapy, a small percentage of them, their tumors grow. It's called hyperprogression. I don't use the term turbo cancer, but
We use hyperprogression because it's more clinical
understood.
sounding. Sounds like a real medical
There's
term.
also pseudoprogression that happens when people get cancer immunotherapy. And you have to tell the difference between those two, because the pseudoprogression is a mass that looks like it's getting bigger because the immune system is fighting it. And
inflamed,
so,
and then we'll go back down.
some
And
of
you
the
can
things that have
actually
been
tell that
reported of these
with a number
tumors
of
that seem to
different
be
tests,
popping
depending
up
on
and
the
growing
type
really
of tumor
quickly. That may not all
there.
be tumor cells that are dividing. I mean, it's the immune cells that are going in there. You get these swellings. And in the end, most of us probably carry cancer cells in our body that are being eliminated by our immune system. And so, we just need to understand more. We need to do science. We need to let scientists do science, ask questions. We need to support it.
Literally nobody's stopping you from
for
doing
support
science.
of
It's just that
biomedical
your results are
research.
made up.
And,
That's
if
the
we want to be
problem.
America first,
If
we
you
need
did
to do
actual
that.
science,
But
we'd be
the,
okay with it. But the problem is when
environment
you
is
do
pretty
actual
toxic
science, you don't get the
as
results
far
that you want.
as
You guys
how
are looking for
people are
results that show that
disparaged. I mean,
hyperprogression,
you just
aka
can't ask the
turbo
question.
cancer, are
Oh,
being caused.
I'm glad you brought up informed consent. One of our events, we had Dr. Renata Moon show the package insert for the injection.
Oh boy, would I
Full
really like
piece of
to
paper.
know
It was
the
written on
basis for
intentionally
which
left
we
blank. So,
don't
yeah,
have
that is
informed
not
consent.
informed
I bet all
consent.
of the institutional review boards of the
talked about
IRBs
boosting
that
your immune system. I
oversee
think that's
Dr.
Dr. Soon
Elfuri's
Shung's
clinical
technique.
trials would be very interested to
Anktiva,
know that
and,
he
trying to
thinks
boost
informed
T
consent
cell
is not
production
possible
stuff.
to
Again,
attain.
these are theories.
Because
He's
I
got
think that
approval
none
for a
of his
certain type of
protocols for
bladder
his
cancer.
clinical
Can't get
research
approval
would be
for some of
approved if
which
you
kind of
weren't
is
able
crazy
to
to
show
me.
that
So
he's able to
he's
get
got,
informed
I don't know how many
consent.
people on the waiting list. They've got to go to LA to get treated. So, I mean,
Something maybe for the Brown
I,
University
like
IRB
many of my
to look
colleagues,
into.
believe the immune system is our last hope if we're going to cure cancer. And by the way, we discovered a drug. We did basic science that was funded almost 20 years ago. The drug was approved for treating brain cancer, and it boosts our innate immune system. The same type of natural killer cells that Dr. Soon Shang is trying to
Patrick Soon-Shiong is
use to
the
help patients. So
essentially snake oil biotech billionaire who owns the Los Angeles Times and has turned the LA
they do,
Times
but
into
there's also
sort of
data,
the
when
newspaper
people have
equivalent of
combined
CBS News.
chemo with immunotherapy, and I've asked this question, 10 years ago, it doesn't make sense. And then the answer comes back, but the data shows it works better. So, we have to be open-minded about what's observed, and the data speaks for itself. Yes, of course, the immune system is so important. It's known people who are immunosuppressed are at risk for cancer. People have had organ transplants. You stop there, or you take away their immunosuppressive agents, and their
They die
immune
of graft
system
versus
comes
host
back
disease.
and can eliminate the cancer.
okay. Dr. Molstreet.
Well, what I would like to add is that from early 2020, I think there was a major shift in public health policies. In the past, we had a system where the public health was based on weighing costs and benefits,
her
including
necklace
short
say?
and long-term harms, and disease burden was assessed on estimates of life years lost or impaired. And what also was taken into account was
Somebody
that
needs to
gross
color that
socioeconomic
Sex in the
status
City
was
fashion
linked
was
to lower
like
life
hot, like
expectancy,
about 25
especially
years
in
ago.
low and middle income countries, but also in high income countries. And therefore, at that point, it was clear that
But maybe she's a little
should
behind
not
the time.
implement border closures,
Maybe she just has to
lockdowns, no
recycle old styles
restrictions
now
on
that she's
health
unemployed.
people. And
So
then
probably
something
she is
changed,
making money
apparently,
from
and
some
I
kind of
think that
side
has to do
hustle.
with the rapid growth of certain industries that brought
Maybe it's just
unprecedented
poor taste.
wealth to a few individuals who have greater assets than some medium-sized companies. And the direction of part of this wealth to health through philanthropy, particularly public-private
Oh, now she's
partnerships,
saying that
I
Bill
think
Gates
that is what
is,
changed
this is Bill
the
Gates
public
stuff.
health policies that we are facing now. And you have to realize that there are significant conflicts of interest stemming from massive crossover between private wealth investments, philanthropic initiatives, and global health policy directives. So if you want to change, I think, for the future, something, then it's important to address this influence of public-private partnerships on international organizations such as the World Health Organization, governments, but also very important on the media. They sponsor grants to journalism and media outlets, and of course on science with regard to their funding of
Oh,
universities.
excuse me, Dr. Mostert.
That's a major point.
I didn't realize
And
that
another
you
major
were
point,
living in the
referring to
US
my
as
testimony,
well.
I think what also needs to be learned from the COVID pandemic
Is this
is that
something
we
that's
are
affecting only the
in
Netherlands,
need
or are you
of
just like
legislative and
pronouncing how
regulatory
things should be
frameworks
around the world?
to address
No more
the
philanthropy
psychological
because there's
manipulation,
conflicts of
fear propaganda,
interest
and
and
the
they're not
censorship that has
advancing
been
anti-vax
implemented
stuff.
to
And you
protect
lost your job
public
because you're a
health in the
shitty
future,
scientist who published a
and
shitty paper.
also
You were
to
going to get
assure that
fired for
science
it.
is not
So you
adjusted
quit
to political
and made it sound like you were a
ideologies or
whistleblower and a brave person. And
Dr.
now
Rosen.
you're standing up against all of these global health
I think the
billionaires
first
who are
thing
doing
for
something
me is to
nefarious for
stop
their
these
globalist
retractions
agenda.
because they stop
Not
the
really sure
science,
what.
period.
Just hanging out with
I
the media
think
and
we need to
criticizing you and your
encourage
shitty
scientists
paper,
to
huh?
ask questions, and we need to debate the narrative. A good scientist debates the narrative.
Yeah, we
A
do
good
debate
scientist is
evidence
humble
actually.
to know
But
that
you're
they
not a
may
good
be wrong.
scientist, so you
And that
wouldn't
was
know
me
that.
during the pandemic.
Make the
Am I right?
narrative
Am I wrong?
without
I
having
don't
any
know,
evidence.
but I'm willing to
A good
look at it.
scientist debates
And then I'm
what
willing to
evidence
speak about
shows.
what I
And
saw
sometimes
for
you can
others
look at
to
the same
prove me
evidence and
wrong.
come up with different
You know,
conclusions.
what we
That's
need
where
to
the debate
realize
should
is
happen in
chronic
a
disease
scientific
is
setting.
increasing.
What you're
Cancer
suggesting
is
is that
increasing.
one
Neurological
side made up the
diseases are
narrative,
increasing.
and then we should all
ALS is
just have a
increasing.
debate to decide.
One boy
it's
out of
correct.
12 in
See, that's
California
not the
has
scientific
autism.
method.
What
That
is it
is
going to be in 100 years
tactics
from now?
that you
One in
anti-vaxxers
one
have
kid
been using
born
for a
going to be
long time
autistic.
to
This is
enrich
why
your
I'm up.
business.
This
at
is
the
why I'm
expense
here. This is
of
why I've
US
done my
taxpayer
research.
dollars.
I think we need to stop the destruction of microbes. Our lab has discovered that less than 5% have good bacteria that
Our
help
lab,
absorb sugar. And 1 out of 4,000
ivermectin
samples that we've analyzed
telemedicine
have a
business.
bacteria that is able to break down calcium to get into the cells. What happens when those microbes disappear? What are we
See,
doing?
bacteria don't have to break
We're
down
creating an
calcium because
increase in
calcium is an
disease,
element.
and we're not stopping to see
So
what
I
we
don't
are
know
doing to
actually
damage
how
the
calcium
disease. And when
breaks
somebody
down
comes out and
calcium.
says, look,
Cells have their
we're
own
doing this and
calcium
it's counter
transporters.
a
In fact,
narrative, they're being
multiple Nobel
stopped,
Prizes
when
have
we
been
should
won
be
for
encouraging
how all of this works.
the research and the
They
science to
are
see if that person is right
membrane-spanning
and
proteins. They are
analyzing in
ion
depth
channels that
what are
move
we
calcium
doing.
ions in and out of
So
cells, and
I
that's
think
actually
more
important for
humility in
muscle
science,
work.
more freedom of speech to
So
the
actually, you
scientist,
don't
more
need your
protection to the
cyanobacteria
scientist,
bacteria
and
to do
stopping
anything
the
about calcium
retractions.
transport. What the fuck
Can I
are
read
you
more?
talking
Dr.
about?
Malhotra.
I just want to reiterate what Dr. Eldiri said really around the issue of informed consent. And I'll give you one example that a
How
lot of
would
people
you know
may,
what kind
may
of
resonate
informed
with.
consent is offered
So,
in the US?
and this is
Because
my area
last
of
time I
expertise where I've
checked,
done
again,
research
you
specifically.
practice
Between
and live
200 million
and work
and 1
and were
billion people
trained
globally
in the United
prescribe
Kingdom,
a
not
drug
the
called
same country.
statins. These are cholesterol-lowering drugs. Now,
I
if you are
don't
at low risk
hate
of heart disease,
statins.
which is most of these
Really
people
hate
prescribed
statins.
statins, your benefit over a 5-year period, looking at the totality of evidence, is 1%. There is a 1 in 100 chance if you take that drug religiously, it'll prevent you having a heart attack or stroke, but without prolonging your life. If you are older than 75, and I use the example, and if you'd allow me to do so, on publicly available data, we know that President Trump is in excellent health. But what I find a bit confusing is the fact that we look at people, somebody like
Is
President
that-
Trump, who's over 75, without any evidence of significant vascular disease, no evidence of significant heart disease.
Oh, I don't know. I'd
etc.
say that his bruising
benefit
is
for someone like
evidence of
President Trump
significant
taking a statin
vascular
is
disease.
1 in
And I'm no
446.
physician of any
So that's
kind.
446 people over
That
75.
dude has
with
some
preventive heart disease.
vascular problems.
He's
As
also
somebody
taking
who is an
aspirin. I
expert
was
in
looking
Ebola
at this
virus
recently
pathogenesis, that dude has coagulation
released
issues.
data on President Trump, what he's taking. And again, if you don't have any significant vascular disease, your risk of a fatal bleed is significantly higher than preventing a heart attack. The point I'm making here, and I'm hoping President Trump is aware of this, but I suspect he isn't, is no one is immune to medical misinformation, not even the president. So the system is actually more
No, see,
powerful
it's
than
not
the
medical
individual, and
misinformation
that's what
for
we're dealing with.
President
So
Trump to
collectively,
take
we have to sort
aspirin
this
or
out
whatever, blood thinners, like whatever he needs, and you're not his
Dr.
doctor.
Graylow.
So, Asim,
I think
maybe you shouldn't
single one of
sit
us on
here
this
and
panel
armchair
wants
diagnose
what's
the president of
best
the United
for our
States, who
patients. And I
obviously has
think
massive medical problems,
50,000 members of our
vascular
professional
and
society of
argue
physicians who
neurodegenerative.
treat
Um,
cancer patients
So none
want
of
what's
us
best for
are
our
qualified
patients.
to do that,
I
including,
think we also agree that we need to understand
I think at
the
least Dr.
risks
Graylow is
and the
going
benefits
to
of any
decline
vaccine, of any
to
drug,
engage in
of
some
any
sort of
treatment,
speculative
and the
diagnosis
risks and
that
benefits can
completely
be different
inappropriate
depending
to make
on the
a
person
politically
as well.
motivated
They can be individualized.
She's going
We
to
believe in
actually
shared
talk
decision
about what
making, which
the
means a
reality is
discussion between
and
the
the
patient
ethics
and the
that both
clinician,
competent scientists
understanding the
apply
patient's
to
goals and
understanding
wishes
evidence-based
and desires.
how that
And
might help
true
American health.
informed consent is difficult when you don't have the numbers. You cannot use hypothetical or kind of unproven without numbers kind of information about either the benefits or the risks. Wearing my cancer hat, I would have to say that the evidence at this point in time shows overall that COVID vaccines have more benefits and they outweigh the risks in our cancer population.
Hey, guess what?
I
All
never
of the
got
data
to
keeps
speak on
showing
this
that
piece of
over and over
the
again,
hearing, but
literally over
I
and over
fully
and over
believe
again.
that we should have respectful and open scientific discussion. We should be able to
Indeed.
disagree, but then back up and do the research or the studies to prove it. It should not be done on social media, and it should not be done in an anonymized way, as has been done.
Thank you, Dr. Graylow. Ms. Felder, you are in the anchor position there.
Thank you all. Again, I just want to say the patient voice is really important, and I'm really happy to be here to represent cancer patients. June 14th is the 25th anniversary of my surgery that I had just up the road at Johns Hopkins. I'm very thankful to the medical team there. I'm thankful to my oncologist. And even though treatment is tough, it's hard on the body and it does damage cells, I'm very thankful for that advancement because I wouldn't be here without that treatment. I want science to continue to advance so that we have more options for patients. And I'd like for the federal government to help those scientists and back that science and also the research. Thank you.
Me too,
Appreciate
Tamika.
that.
Me
Yeah,
too.
It's about the patients. In the end, it's about the patients. And as a potential
Really,
one
it
myself.
doesn't seem like that, Ron.
I don't know.
You
what
seem
to
to be a
do.
lot more concerned with
Part of
these
the problem.
various things
So
that
who
you've
do
brought
you
up
believe? Who do you turn
than the
to?
patient.
And so, as I've said repeatedly, I think the number one job of RFK Jr. is to restore integrity to science. That's really the main purpose of this hearing is to
Well,
just show, that there's been corruption. It's not good. And I agree with you completely, Dr. Graylow.
There's been
I was
corruption,
hoping
all
this
right.
would be, as
Look into the
collaborative
guy who
between,
caused it,
new
AKA Bobby
experts here as
Brainworm,
possible.
is not the way
I
that
just
you're
find
going
a lot more areas of agreement than
now.
disagreement here, and that's encouraging, and that's what we need to keep seeking for. But don't just dismiss, don't try to destroy people's lives when they disagree. If there's a one word definition of science, I think it's skepticism. It's what's driven science throughout history. You need the skeptic. You need somebody looking like,
not
okay, I know you guys are pretty certain about that, but
It's a method, actually.
not looking good to me.
Is
I'm
testing
seeing
the
something else,
hypothesis
and then, give
to
that
assess
person
whether or
confidence is
not
going to destroy them. That's what
it
we've
is
seen way
correct.
too many people destroyed.
using
Very, very
evidence
So
in a
yeah,
way.
I truly appreciate this. I know it's not easy. It's not cheap to come here. It's a lot of work to prepare these testimonies and stuff. And And I truly appreciate it. I think it's been an excellent hearing. The record for this hearing will remain open for 15 days until Thursday, June 18th, 2026 at 5 p.m. For the submission of statements and questions for the record, this hearing is adjourned.
Well, thank God. So that was a total shit show. And, I've got other Ebola stuff and my friend and collaborator getting arrested and charged with federal crimes for doing his job effectively. So I've got other stuff going on, and I unfortunately will not be able to spend all night getting lectured and tone policed by Wafiq al-Deri, although I at some point am going to have to note that he literally named a stupid oncogene WAF1 after himself. It's kind of hilarious. Anyways, I'm going to sign off now, and we've got another Ebola expert panel tonight. So I've just been on camera for a lot of the day, and I'm going to go maybe get something to eat before my medical issue decides to make itself known, since it is a gastrointestinal issue. Anyhow, thanks for joining me and sticking with it for 3 hours and 15 minutes today, guys. Wow, this was
Hey guys, welcome to the live by IntelliPod.
See you later. Wow, and this is not the thing that should have autoplayed next. It's an instruction on how to start coding from scratch using Microsoft Copilot. I don't have any interest in that. I did want to say goodbye though. And thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for tolerating me interrupting all of these snake oil salespeople as they spewed bullshit in real time. I will keep doing this whenever there's another sort of clown show hearing like this. I really, really appreciate everybody who has the patience to look into this and to truly understand what's at stake here. I think a lot of these people count on the fact that people are not going to necessarily tune into this. And some of this stuff is actually really kind of boring. But these decisions that get made as a result of hearings like this, they're for show, but in the long run, they actually can be extremely consequential. And if we're talking about treating cancer with ivermectin or using ivermectin to treat COVID, we're talking about treating people with drugs that don't work to treat those diseases, and people dying as a result. And to me, that is unethical, it's unscientific, and it's deeply un-American. We have made decisions in the US, regulatory decisions about what we're going to recommend, and scientific funding decisions based on evidence historically. Now we're doing it for political objectives, and we're doing it in such a way that it is literally going to cost people their lives. And to me, that is not what American taxpayers are signing up for. This is not what we expect our government to do for us. We don't expect our government to say that because of our politics, your lives are expendable. The government is supposed to work for the American people because the American people are the American government. That's how democracy works. These people are lying so that we will stop participating in our own health. And this goes into whether or not we can participate in our own society and the governance of our own country. This is a really, really serious issue. So I'm deeply, deeply grateful for everybody who stuck it out with me this whole time. Thanks so much. And I'm going to keep holding people accountable for the lies that they're telling about vaccines, about infectious diseases, about cancer, about scientific research, and about the purpose of this truly. I have no patience whatsoever for people who want to make us a sicker, less healthy, less economically well, less happy place to live. America is the greatest country in the world, and it's going to be that again, but it will never be with these people in charge. So we need to hold them accountable and stop them from making more policies that are going to kill us. Anyways, I'll see you tomorrow for my daily rant show. Bye, guys. Also, get vaccinated.